Chapter 71 Ambush. Cynical dialection equals wild dog Taoist. Nian boss equals Nian leader. Lin Fang equals Lin Feng. Lai Brus equals Tian Shu. Fuwa equals Buddhism. Fa'an wisdom equals Great Brahman wisdom. Bilu equals Bai Yao. I have also made a correction to Book 3, Chapter 70, The Past, Part 1 to change Dead Spirit Deep Cool to Forsaken Abyss. The 5 of them were all from Qing Yun sect, so while using their magical weapons to fly at full speed, the speed was naturally unbelievably fast. Within a short time, all of them, using their magical weapons' subtle lights, could already faintly view the boundaries of the forest, and even further away, the sea that was disappearing into the darkness of the night. A breeze blowing from the sea, accompanied by the intermittent long whistling, reverberated in the late night. Everyone was delighted, their moods brightened and were intending to speed up and fly out of that dark forest. Suddenly, at that moment, a dark red stream of light shot out silently from the darkness, in a flash, hit Hidaji, who was in the middle of the group. Hidaji groaned, his body swayed, and fell from midair. Song Darren and the rest were shocked, but had already flew some distance in that span of seconds, quickly turned back. Zhang Xiaofan, Tian Linger, who were following behind, also quickly flew towards Hidaji. Among them, Zhu Bishu was nearest to Hidaji, his reaction was also the fastest. Immediately he abruptly stopped his body physique and landed beside Hidaji. He scanned the surrounding areas while urgently asking, "Fourth brother, are you all right?" Hidaji's forehead was already covered with cold sweat within that short while, hoarsely said, "Be careful, that person's demonic skills were quite powerful." He had not even completed the sentence, in the darkness, another stream of dark red light shot over. Du Bishu frowned, thrown himself sideways in front of Hidaji. Both of his hands moved to grab hold of his magical weapon, that 3 mysterious and strange dices immediately flew out, to receive that red light. In the darkness, a sound, "Yi," was heard from someone. That exclamation seemed to carry a feeling of odd surprise, but it was directed at the outlook of the magical weapon. Whether Du Bishu's skills were high or low, that stream of light did not hesitate and continued to attack. In that split second, both objects collided. Du Bishu's body shook from the impact, and when that light hit onto his dices, a feeling of dense evil energy spread onto his own weapon, and at the same time, using his weapon as a medium, he indistinctly felt that it was inclining to attack him. Du Bishu was shocked. He had never seen that level of evil heretic skill before. While he was still lost on his next move, Song Darren, Ling Tian'er and the rest had already arrived. Zhang Xiaofan followed behind, and frowned. He felt that that red light was somehow familiar, seemed like evil faction Blood Forger Hall, Nian leader's Red Devil Eye encountered at Forsaken Abyss. As expected, following a few long laughters, a number of people walked out from the darkness. It was really the group of people from Blood Forger Hall, headed by Nian leader. Nian leader stood up front, a big red eye on his face, looking extremely horrible. However, it was already slowly starting to return to normal. And behind him, that beautiful lady and Lu Gao, wild dog Taoist, were also there, only the young Lin Feng was not seen. Zhang Xiaofan had met these people many times, he recognized them at one glance, especially that wild dog Taoist. It was him who brought the blood-sucking demon over tonight and caused Zhang Xiaofan to suffer so much hardship. But looking at him at that moment, wild dog's face was full of green and purple patches and riddled with scars. It was most probably because he was carelessly flung by blood-sucking demon a while ago, but unfortunately he crashed into that thick wooded forest, which made him disoriented and a swollen face. These people from Blood Forger Hall were weak and powerless. While the evil faction's main sects battled intensely against the good faction, they were, however, assigned to that faraway forest boundary to wait for fishes that slipped through the net. Obviously, the evil faction looked down on them. Nian leader and the rest were angry but did not dare to speak out. They had been sulking, but unexpectedly there were actually people who escaped out from the forest. It was a really good opportunity for them to gain favor. They only had to capture these people, and in the days to come, Blood Forger Hall's status in evil faction would naturally leveled up. Wild Dog Taoist was, at first, extremely depressed tonight. When he turned and looked, he suddenly discovered that Qing Yun lad was actually also among the 5 people, and at that moment the lad was also looking back at him. His face expression appeared to have a smile, but yet not a smile, presumably laughing at him. This time, Wild Dog's anger was no trivial matter. Because blood-sucking demon's skill attainments were too high, and with his savage and cruel characteristic, even with 10 guts, Wild Dog also would not have the courage to seek revenge. But at that moment he saw Zhang Xiaofan, his immediate thought was that if not for that brat, he would not have suffered that kind of misery. Instantly, his anger rushed to his head, he cried wah wah twice, brandished his magical weapon, a long sharp fang, and attacked Zhang Xiaofan. Since the sneak attack was successful, Nian leader was feeling arrogant himself and was about to say a few words like, "All of you better smarten up and you would suffer less." Those kind of arrogant sarcastic words. Unexpectedly, he had not even uttered the words when Wild Dog had already charged out. The words were on the verge of being said out, his mouth was half opened and was about to speak, yet he had to forcibly swallow back those words. In that moment of agitation, he felt a pain in his chest and had to cough twice. He was extremely vexed. Song Darin quickly flew to Hidaji's side, landed and did a check. He discovered that due to the sudden attack and his junior brother was unable to defend in time, that evil heterodox energy had already penetrated his body. It seemed like he would not be able to fight for a short period of time, but luckily there was no danger to his life. While he was worrying over that, suddenly he heard two strange shouts behind him, and saw a sorcerer, whose face resembled a dog, charging over. Junior Zhang Xiaofan wielded his magical weapon and received the blows, ping ping pang pang, an aggressive fight started. From far, Nian leader angrily glared at Wild Dog, but soon after, he started to frown. He recognized the one fighting with Wild Dog now, was the Qingyun lad who had that strange firestick-like magical weapon. That day at Forsaken Abyss, his very own Red Devil Eye actually could do nothing to that person, and nearly suffered some damage from him, therefore he had a very deep impression. By then, Wild Dog Taoist and Zhang Xiaofan had already fought for some time, the two figures flashed between the trees in the forest, and almost became two streams of light flitting by. But in Wild Dog Taoist's heart, he was instead becoming more and more alarmed. Since their last encounter several months ago, Zhang Xiaofan's skill level actually progressed much more than that day at Forsaken Abyss, and especially that strangely looking firestick in his hand. It had an ugly outlook but with glittering green light, flashing here and there in front of him. Each time his fang magical weapon attacked, it was immediately defeated by that fire stick, and as time passed by, that green-black ordinary pearl at the head of the fire stick slowly began to radiate a noxious suction force, targeting him. Wild Dog Taoist's heart turned cold. He could not help but recall that day that unlucky Zhang Lao San was sucked dry by this lad without any rhyme or reason and died. He silently lamented that how was it possible that nowadays those little bastards from good faction, the magical weapons in their hands were actually tenfold more evil than your own Wild Dog grandfather. Nian leader frowned tightly. Since many of the holy sect members were here tonight, he expected that it would be not long before someone made their way over, and if they saw that Blood Forger sect currently could not even handle a few Qingyun juniors, then in the future they would be too ashamed to face anyone. Immediately he turned and signaled to both Beautiful Lady and Lu Gao. Both of them understood, they moved immediately and headed to the scene. But almost at the same time, Song Darin and Ling Tian'er also went up to receive them. The circumstances tonight were actually unfavorable to the good faction. Initially everyone thought the gathering at this desolated land involved only the small group of evil faction remaining members. Unexpectedly not only a huge number of people turned out, even those old evil heads living in seclusion for 100 years also came. Song Darin felt anxious. It seemed they were again entangled with the evil faction and he intended to go all out to dispose these evil demons in order to get away. Unexpectedly when he had just made his move, sideways a stream of dark red light struck towards him. Song Darin quickly used his celestial sword to receive it, his heart filled with trepidation. The evil toxic energy from the Red Devil Eye passed through the 10 Tigers celestial sword in an instant and continued to advance. Song Darin's level of Taoism attainment was deep. Naturally he was able to withstand it, but at the same time, he felt that this sorcerer's skills were in fact not low, and might even surpass himself. At that moment, Tian Linger had already started fighting with that beautiful lady. Du Bishu looked on from the side for a while, and already could tell that that big eye sorcerer's demonic skills were powerful and big senior brother was having some difficulty, so he rushed up and joined Song Darin to fight as 2 against 1. Nian leader never moved from his spot. The red stream of light filled with evil deadly energy continued to shoot out from his Red Devil Eye. Even when it was 2 against 1, he was still not at a disadvantage. And at a distance away, Lu Gao instead went to assist Wild Dog, and attacked Zhang Xiaofan together. But Zhang Xiaofan, after all, was not that Nian leader, who had trained for many years. After a short while, he immediately felt the pressure. Wild Dog now had a strong ally and it boosted his morale. He laughed loudly and said, "Stinky brat, Today you are in my hands, watch how Wild Dog Grandpa take care of you. Zhang Xiaofan was unable to speak out the difficulties in his heart and only felt the pressure was mounting. But he could only grit his teeth and hang on, hoping both his senior brothers and sister could quickly defeat the other sorcerers so that they could come over and help him. Actually, ever since he comprehended some parts of Tian Shu from the Black Stone Cave, his attainments had already progressed to the next level without his own awareness. It was just that firstly, the time he took to comprehend was too short, and he did not practice enough. Secondly, he was also unable to use the Buddhism's great Brahman wisdom in front of everyone. Lastly, most importantly, tonight he was beaten by the blood-sucking demon. Although his injuries were not serious, but because at the moment, he was fighting intensively, as time goes by, his body was beginning not to heed his will. And looking at the fight beside, Tian Linger was almost equal to that beautiful lady. Both flew high and evaded low, their appearances were also equally beautiful, and with their graceful figures, it was actually nice to watch. However, to come over and help, it would be hard to do so for a short period of time. And over at Songdaran, Dubishu, at the moment, both were being tied down tightly by Nyan Leader and were unable to get away. Although they saw that their junior brother's situation was increasingly becoming dangerous, but with round after round of unceasingly stream of dark red light attacking, even if it was urgent, they were also unable to get away, and instead because of the distraction, both were almost hit by the red light. Zhang Xiaofan was forced to move back by both Wild Dog and Lu Gao. Beads of perspiration appeared on his forehead, his breathing became labored, even some of his steps were also disordered. He dodgy lie on the ground, his heart became anxious. He knew that if there were still no help given, in a period of 3 minutes, he was afraid his junior brother would be killed by these two sorcerers. The Bamboo Valley sect disciples had always been close towards this honest junior brother, Zhang Xiaofan. They always had been fond of him. Right now, he dodgy gritted his teeth, forced himself to stand up, took out his magical weapon and intended to give a helping hand to his junior brother. But he had not even summoned the commands, the evil energy inside his body began to flow in reverse. His head spinned and saw stars, and Po Tong fell over again. Zhang Xiaofan heard the sound, turned around from the intensive battle, and immediately was shocked. He cried out, "Fourth brother!" Unexpectedly, at that moment when he was distracted, Wild Dog and Lu Gao's weapons attacked at the same time. Zhang Xiaofan could not react in time and barely managed to raise his fire stick in front of him to defend. Hong! A loud sound, Wild Dog and Lu Gao's bodies shook violently, but Zhang Xiaofan's body flew out from the impact and hit the ground hard. Wild Dog gave a loud laugh, flew up together with Lu Gao, his fang and Lu Gao's weapon raised up and struck down, about to take Zhang Xiaofan's life. At a distant, Tian Linger, Song Daran and the rest cried out involuntarily, but was unable to come to his rescue in time, and could only watch helplessly as Zhang Xiaofan was about to die there. Hidaji had already turned his head over, he could not bear to watch anymore. Suddenly, a flash of blue light shot past in the forest, an aperture as blue as water waves, quickly rippled over, illuminating the whole place in an instant. Hidaji was overjoyed, he involuntarily called out, "Lu!" He had not completed his sentence, and saw that figure broke through the sky, like an arrow shot from a bow. Lu Shuiqi rode on her sword, her face as cold as frost, but in her pair of bright eyes, rays of blue light from the Tianya sword in front of her reflected in it, as if it was emitting blazing flares, burning unceasingly. Wild Dog and Lu Gao were greatly shocked, the blue light that was just seen a distant away, was now in front of them in an blink of an eye. And looking at it, it seemed to have the ability to split the sky and break a mountain, an eternal unparalleled grandeur. Comparing both matters, their own lives were naturally more important. Almost at the same time, both of them took back their weapons, and struck back together at the Tianya sword. Rumbled sands flew and stones rolled, the trees in the forest nearby violently swayed, leaves fell one after another. Wild Dog and Lu Gao flew backwards, landed straight behind Nyan Leader. Lu Shuiqi's figure slowly emerged from the sky full of falling leaves, stood beside Zhang Xiaofan. It could be because of that violent impact just now, her face looked especially pale. Zhang Xiaofan turned to look at her, but in the dim light of the night, her appearance was still breathtakingly beautiful, like a proud lily that bloomed in the deepest darkness. And in that ice-cold elegant expression, he instead indistinctly saw, was a trace of faint gentleness. "Thank you." Zhang Xiaofan suppressed the sudden feeling of a jump in his heart and said in a low voice. Lu Shuiqi shook her head, quietly said, "When I encountered danger in that forsaken abyss, you two saved me like this, why bother to say these words?" Zhang Xiaofan was stunned. For a moment he did not know what to say and silently nodded. Lu Shuiqi looked at him, and suddenly smiled lightly. That was a smile in the sky full of falling leaves. Zhang Xiaofan saw it clearly. It was as if under the starlight, the frost melted only in front of him. Zhang Xiaofan suddenly swung his head. He dare not look at Lu Shuiqi again. He grabbed his fire stick and ran towards his big senior brother who was dueling with Nian leader. Lu Shuiqi stood behind him, watched his back figure, and was silent for a moment. She followed after him and went up to receive the attacks from Wild Dog and Lu Gao, who were coming to obstruct them. With the addition of Lu Shuiqi, the situation immediately changed. Her level of attainments was already high, and it progressed to another level after she escaped danger in Forsaken Abyss. Besides, she also had the divine weapon, Tianya. Even as Lu Gao and Wild Dog attacked as 2 against 1 at the moment, both were actually still at a disadvantage. And for Nian leader, once he saw Zhang Xiaofan joining the fight, his heart jumped a beat. He was not afraid of this lad's skills but was extremely fearful of the strange stick in his hands. As expected, when Zhang Xiaofan came, he steered his fire stick to block a few shots of red light. The expression in his face did not even change. The red devil eyes, evil deadly energy that Song Darren and etc. were exceptionally wary of, seemed to be completely useless on him. With that, Song Darren and Du Bishu were able to free their hands. The celestial sword and dices immediately went forward to give their greetings on Nian leader's body. Nian leader cried out indignantly repeatedly, but even how much he tried to hasten the efforts of the red devil eye, Zhang Xiaofan only felt a bit of strain while blocking the red energy light but was absolutely not affected in any way by the deadly energy. In a short while, Nian leader was already pulling on the lapels and exposing the elbows. In short, unable to handle the situation, in the chaos he looked to the side, and saw that Lu Gao, Wild Dog, including that beautiful lady, also looked as if they were not able to gain an upper hand. He had no alternatives but to shout loudly, "Go!" While he shouted, the red devil eye suddenly behaved as if it had exploded. Suo suo suo, 7 or 8 streams of red lights shot out simultaneously. Zhang Xiaofan only managed to block 5 lights, but the rest of the lights already block off Song Darren and Du Bishu. Nian leader took advantage of this window, turned around and escaped. And those further away Blood Forger Hall members had also started to retreat. Lu Shuiqi snorted, "Disregard Song Darren's yell of, 'Do not pursue the beaten enemy.'" The Tianya celestial sword streaked across the sky, and pursued straight ahead. Zhang Xiaofan was taken aback, and quickly followed. The blue light of Tianya was like electricity, it caught up instantly. Trailing at the end was Wild Dog, who only felt the cold air behind him whooshing. Even the fine hairs at his back were standing up. Unwillingly he gave an odd cry of, "Help!" Nian leader and the rest were shocked and quickly turned back, but at that time, behind the Blood Forger Hall members, from within the depths of the dark forest, suddenly a ray of white light flashed by, and a white flower drifted out from it. Zhang Xiaofan was standing behind. He stopped in his track, lost for words. That strange white flower flashed and flashed again in the air. In a split second white light swept past the whole area, and seemed to conjure countless of white flower petals, turning into a rain of flowers. Like a tranquil sea of flowers, it charged towards the blue light of Lu Shuiqi's sword. Lu Shuiqi's Tianya celestial sword did not make any attempt to avoid and charged up straight. In an instant, the 2 extraordinary weapons with peculiar lights collided together. Time, for that moment, seemed to suspend for 1 minute. Suddenly, an invisible but strong wave of energy exploded from that collision. With the 2 magical weapons as the core, it exploded out in all directions. Fallen leaves fell like rain but instead were blown up towards the sky, and those people on the ground, a few actually moved back a few steps. After a long time, the howling of the wind began to slowly quiet down. Lu Shuiqi flew back and stood beside Zhang Xiaofan. Zhang Xiaofan looked at her. She appeared to look even paler, and it seemed like there was not even any color on her face. Lu Shuiqi seemed to feel Zhang Xiaofan's concern, turned to look at him and nodded slightly, implying that she was all right. Zhang Xiaofan turned his head away and looked ahead. In the darkness, that strange white flower slowly spinned in midair, and after a short while, it started to descend. There was no sound, but out of a sudden, a hand as white as snow, stretched out from the darkness and gently took that heartbroken rare flower. Zhang Xiaofan suddenly felt his heart jumped again. Bai Yao quietly, very quietly, walked out from the darkness. The expressions on Nian leader and the rest appeared to be respectful, but Bai Yao did not even glance at them. A pair of eyes, only concentrated on Zhang Xiaofan, and then shifted onto the person next to him, Lu Shuiqi, carefully assessing. Lu Shuiqi's gaze did not have any intention to avoid, and also stared at the girl standing opposite her, whose elegance surpassed many others. Nobody spoke a word. The atmosphere from the intense fight earlier on quietened down all of a sudden, and also seemed to carry some awkwardness. Zhang Xiaofan looked at Bai Yao, and looked at Lu Shuiqi again, and felt that his mouth had turned dry. Unexpectedly at that moment, footsteps sound was heard. It was Tian Linger who had walked over to him. She looked strangely at Lu Shuiqi and Bai Yao, who was staring at each other, and asked Zhang Xiaofan, what happened to them? Zhang Xiaofan was startled, but actually, he did not quite understand too. Deep down, he felt strange and embarrassed, and was caught unaware by Tian Linger's question. He stammered and replied that he did not know why. But just that Tian Linger this question, Bai Yao and Lu Shuiqi both suddenly turned and looked at her. That two pairs of calm, quiet eyes brushed over Tian Linger's face. Tian Linger was startled and unconsciously moved back a few steps, but she and Lu Shuiqi, after all, were from the same sect, therefore she went to ask Lu Shuiqi, Lu Senior's sister, what happened. Lu Shuiqi was silent for a while, looked away and said quietly, nothing. At the same time, Bai Yao, who was standing in front, also looked away. Zhang Xiaofan stared blankly and shook himself suddenly, silently reprimanded himself for being absurd. Now that everyone here was being exposed to danger which lurked everywhere, he himself instead was staring blankly. He should really be damned. Immediately he spoke to both Tian Linger and Lu Shuiqi in a low voice, let's quickly go. There are really too many evil faction disciples on the island. A cold snort sounded, with a hint of anger. It was, however, made by Bai Yao, who was standing in front. Zhang Xiaofan did not dare to look at her, turned and went back. Lu Shuiqi glanced at Bai Yao again, following which she and Tian Linger also went back together. Song Darren and the rest waited for them to come back, helped the injured Hidaji up, said, let's quickly go. Saying which he turned and prepared to head towards the direction of the sea. Behind them, Wild Dog was leaping with eagerness but was pulled down by Nian Leader. He said, Miss Bai Yao is here, do not act recklessly, we will all listen to Mrs. commands. Bai Yao heard it, but remained indifferent and only watched the Qing Yun sect members gradually retreated while being on the guard against them. And her figure remained motionless. Far away, from the direction of the sea that Zhang Xiaofan and the rest retreated towards, a long and mournful cry sounded suddenly, and this time, the sound of the cry was far from the cries heard earlier tonight. Like dragons singing, it resounded through the 9 heavens and shook the surrounding lands. Also faint thunder sounds were rumbling, but that cry seemed to come from the depths of the sea. Bai Yao stood where she was, lifted her head and felt coolness on her face. A drop of water landed on her face. The wind started to blow, it had begun to rain. Chapter 72 Kui Niu. Abyss snake equals ancient demon. Abyssal viper equals black water mystical viper. Peak of widow equals Tong Tian peak. Mr. Spirit equals venerated spirit. Water Kirin equals water unicorn. Ring of Empyrean light equals ring of universe clear light. Like all of a sudden, drizzle of rain fell from the gloomy sky, and from the depths of the distant sea, gusts of violent strong winds, like a wild animal breaking through its cage, howled towards that isolated small island in the middle of the boundless sea. The wind laden with rain, surged over like literary, hiding the sky and covering the earth. In a blink of an eye, those people were caught in the storm. Zhang Xiaofan followed the rest, and stopped too. He raised his hands and barely managed to shield against the lashing wind and rain. Those raindrops with the size of a soybean, hit onto his face, and already he started to feel some pain. Ahead, the sea with large waves battering in the storm. In the night, it also looked like a huge beast who woke up from a deep sleep. It started to roar. In front of Zhang Xiaofan and the rest, was a long beach, and at the end of the beach, lay the fairly savage sea. In the endless dark night, the waves with increasing height, kept coming waves after waves, and crashed heavily onto the smooth beach. Each time it crashed, the earth seemed to shake with it too. Wave, and again another wave. Resembling some ferocious gigantic beast, stepping onto the raging giant waves, slowly making its way over to them. Silence all around, except for the incessantly somber thunderclaps in the dark clouds. Everyone's expression changed. That was the might of heaven and earth. Tian Linger asked Song Darren in a shocked voice, Big senior brother, what shall we do? What is this thing? Song Darren also felt frightened. He had never seen such scene before. A worried frown crossed his face and he agonized on what to do next. But for Zhang Xiaofan, who was standing at the back, although he was also shocked, but because previously at Forsaken Abyss's Heartless Sea, he had witnessed the return of the ancient demon Blackwater mystical viper, and instead was calmer. But when he recalled that day, the might of the Blackwater mystical viper was not what a mere human could handle. He felt a chill in his heart. At the same time, he felt his heart suddenly moved. Unconsciously, he turned and looked at Lu Shuiqi, and saw that beautiful girl silently standing beside him. The wind and rain soaked her clothes and hair, which clung onto her fair and white face. She only stared at the dark far-off places of the sea ahead of her, staring blankly. Yi! Suddenly, Dubishu, who was standing in front, yelped and pointed somewhere in front and urgently said, "All of you look in front, there seemed to be someone." Everyone was surprised and looked over. And really, several tenjong, a unit of length, of the beach ahead, several people emerged suddenly from the darkness. Each and every one of them wore black, and in the darkness of the night, it was hard to notice them if one did not pay attention. Presumably Dubishu had always been sharp-eyed. Unexpectedly they were being discovered by him. But even though they were discovered, with the heavy downpour and night darkness, they simply could not see what those people were doing. They could only faintly saw that those people scattered themselves and were busy on the beach. Tian Linger frowned tightly, turned around and asked, "Did all of you watch closely? Who are these people?" Dubishu and Song Darren both shake their heads at the same time. Lu Shuiqi, who was at the back, suddenly said, "These are the evil faction people." Tian Linger was taken aback for a moment, and immediately understood. At the moment, the good faction members on Lubo Hill were all fighting with the evil faction. Where would it be possible to have those 10 over people doing the strange things on the beach? At the thought of this, she became more worried and could not help but turn to look behind. However, the evil faction disciples who were in the fight just now, not one of them had walked out of the forest. "What shall we do, Senior Big Brother?" Everyone looked at Song Darren. Song Darren hesitated for a while. In the end he still decided that they should avoid the evil faction for now and said, "The circumstances are not favorable to us, we should leave first and decide later." Saying that, he notified everyone, and was about to turn sideways, to go further and make a detour from the beach. However, they had only moved a few steps when they heard a long cry that sounded like a dragon, rumbling from the depths of the sea. In a short while, the sound of wind, rain and thunder from the heaven and earth, the vault of heaven, sounded loudly together. A flash of lightning which ripped apart the vast sky, streaked across the horizon, followed by an explosive sound of thunder from above. From the sea, a rolling wave as high as a small hill, suddenly as if being torn apart, separated. The foaming waves splashed and sprayed. In the raging storm, from the dark depths, almost like stepping on claps of thunder, a massive figure impressively leapt out from the depths of the sea, and after almost blending into the night, landed down heavily. The whole of Lubo Hill, at the same time also quaked. Zhang Xiaofan and the rest of them held their breath. It was an extremely huge strange beast. Its head was slightly bigger than Qingyun Hill Tongtian Peak's venerated spirit water unicorn. The whole body shape resembled a cow, with dark green body, but there was no horn on its head. But most unfathomable was, below the strange beast's huge body, there was only one thick sturdy leg, right in the middle of its stomach. Looking at the beast, it seemed to be a type of monodrama that was popular among the common people. Under that fierce tough exterior, there was actually a slight comical feel and cuteness. Right then, those black attire men on the beach immediately retreated soundlessly into the darkness. But on the beach, every several jong away, a strange object was stuck into the sand. Faint red light glowed out. And just in front of the strange beast, it formed a large circle. In the dark of the night, even though separated by the wind and rain, it was still striking. Over at Qingyun sect side, everyone looked at each other, wondering what the evil faction people were up to. Looking at it, it seemed they were targeting the strange huge beast, but the trap looked too obvious. In the night, anyone would have seen that red circle of light. The only thing that they did not know was what actually was this strange beast. As expected, after that strange beast emerged from the dark sea, it seemed to feel something, and kept standing in the turbulent waves. It did not come ashore and only used its large head to repeatedly stretch out and smell the air. Dubishu suddenly startled and exclaimed, "Oh no, this fellow may have bad eyesight." Everybody also reacted. Right now that few red light spots were really obvious, but the beast only looked and did not notice the things in front of it. Could it be because it had been living in the deep sea without using its eyes, therefore its eyesight had deteriorated? Unknowingly, Qingyin sect disciples instead started to worry for the strange beast. After a short period of time where they held their breath, lightning flashed and thunder boomed, whipping wind and heavy rain, there was no signs of it diminishing. But that strange beast seemed not to detect anything, nonchalantly shaking its head. And without seeing it using any force, suddenly there was another clap of thunder, that huge body launched up into the sky and leapt forward. That unparalleled sturdy leg landed onto Lubo Hill's beach. In the middle of those spots of red light, it left a deep footprint. In the night, within the darkness, almost at the same time, a mysterious chant of incantation started. The chant were like moans of the netherworld, low and distant, wafted through the night storm. Also at the same time, accompanying that mysterious incantation, the light spots which were emitting weak red light, suddenly lighted up at the same time. And the black-attired men who had disappeared just now, also at the same time, returned to the mysterious objects which were stuck into the ground. The strange beast suddenly raised its head, after a short while, gave a tremendous shout. And now, the deafening sound almost became a physical sound wave. The wind and rain, because of the roar that sounded like a thunder which had landed on earth, flew out sideways, projected out. But at this time, all the black-attired men placed their hand upon the mysterious objects on the beach. In an instant, those objects on the ground threw out brilliant lights, crystal clear red light. The red light every several jong away, suddenly shot out sideways, in a short while, became one and formed an enormous circle of red light. Without waiting for anyone's response, that red light circle, magnificently rise up again. Countless of red lights, at the same time, shot out and formed a spectacular wall of red light, trapping that strange beast in it. At the same time, the lights shot up directly towards the sky and finally converged in the higher altitude. It was as if the night had lifted off its veil, the darkness too slowly receded. A figure appeared in the air, slowly emerging. Ghost King, standing proudly on top of a red ancient cauldron, which was floating in the high altitude. His expression was serious, both hands holding the inscription in front of him, reciting that mysterious incantation in a low voice. And all of the red light flowed continuously to converge in that ancient cauldron floating underneath his feet. And now, again, another bellow filled with fury. That strange beast surrounded by the red light circle, leapt up angrily and slammed against the light wall directly. Ghost King, who was in the air, grimaced, and the voice that was reciting the incantation immediately quickened. And the Qing Yun sect members who were standing afar, right now were also dumbstruck. They had forgotten that that moment was actually their best chance to escape, and instead watched on without even blinking. In the sky, almost like above Ghost King's head, a clap of thunder suddenly exploded. That strange beast had slammed onto the light wall with all of its might. Rumble. The thunder rumbled and boomed, reverberated in the sky. In an instant, that impressive huge wall of red light shook like a leaf. Thousands of tiny electrical currents that looked like lighting raced up and down the light wall, producing a piercing sound. Even the black-attired men, standing below the strange beast and separated by the light wall, could not stop shaking. Ghost King's face, in the mid-air, seemed to pale immediately. But eventually, after the violent shaking, this red screen did not crack. On the other hand, it slowly calmed down and that ancient cauldron under the Ghost King's feet, instead became more dazzling. And now, the infuriated huge beast almost went berserk. At the same time the claps of thunder were exploding incessantly in the sky, this strange beast's body started to be suffused with green light. Again and again it slammed against that enormous light wall that was trapping it. Between the earth and the sky, the wind and rain howled, almost as if in the 9 heavens, the thunder god was bellowing with rage too. That successive peals of thunder, each time it seemed to quake Lubo Hill, and shook the entire sea. But even with this impressive heaven and earth's might, that sheet of red light wall including the ancient cauldron in the sky, with no clue on its origin, unexpectedly was unwavering and instead gradually suppressed that strange beast's might. Time slipped by quietly, the poundings from the strange beast had also became weaker and weaker, but looking at the evil faction side, it appeared that they did not have it easy too. Ghost King, who was standing on top of the ancient cauldron in the sky, was better off and only looked pale. Obviously, in order to cast spells to trap such an ancient beast, even though he had help from that unusual ancient cauldron, it was still not easy at all. And those several black-attired men, more than half were already lying on the ground, they were actually killed by the vibrations from the two enormous forces. Those remaining seemed disoriented, only a few of the disciples with high attainments were still able to secure the surroundings around the red screen. The storm also started to diminish, and seemed to forebode something. Eventually, After that strange beast's last pounding was futile, it breathed heavily and cried out softly once, and stood at where it was, no longer moving. The Qing Yun sect members collected their thoughts and looked at each other, unable to speak for the moment. After what seemed like half a day, Du Bishu spoke to Song Daran, big senior brother, what should we do? Zhang Xiaofan also looked at Song Daran. Earlier that electrifying contest aroused him. However, without knowing why, he felt pity for that strange beast instead. Deep inside, he had a desire to lend a helping hand to it. Actually to say, among those Qing Yun sect members, it could not be said that the same thought did not appear in their minds. They were enemies with the evil faction for thousands of years, and witnessed the great pains that the evil faction took to catch this beast. Very likely it had a significant value. But Song Daran, as the eldest senior brother, remained silent for a while and eventually still shook his head and said, "Let's not stir up any trouble, quickly go." Everyone looked at each other, nobody said a word. All of them knew that this was not the time to complicate the issue, thus everyone followed Song Daran, who was already walking ahead. Zhang Xiaofan, who was at the rear, walked a few steps and suddenly realized that Lu Shuiqi did not follow up. He got a shock and turned back but saw that Lu Shuiqi was standing where she was before, without making any step. He curiously asked, "Lu senior sister, what happened to you?" Lu Shuiqi gazed ahead at that strange beast who was trapped behind the wall of red light. The beast bowed his head down, as if it had already resigned to its fate, listlessly standing there. The sky, full of gloomy clouds at this time, also looked like it was going to disperse. The power and might, which caused the heaven and earth's winds and clouds to change countenance, displayed when it just emerged from the sea, to think it would not be seen anymore. As if, a sorrowful child who had came to the end of the road, disheartenedly standing there. Somehow despairing, somewhat lonely. Chang Lang. Rays of blue light, like a meteor suddenly appearing in the night, illuminated the surrounding darkness. Tianya's celestial sword resolutely unsheathed, the clear blue light flashed, reflected on its master's unrivaled beauty face, carrying a hint of indifference and silent gaze. Lu Shuiqi unhurriedly turned her head over, looked at Zhang Xiaofan. Her expression was as cool as ice water, calmly said, "This rare beast seemed to have an important value, you all should quickly go. I will go and be back soon." Everyone was stunned. Zhang Xiaofan opened his mouth slightly, said, "You." He had not completed his sentence. That beautiful figure, turned into this night's resplendent radiance of a shooting star, pierced through the surrounding darkness, charged straight towards that enormous wall of red light. Qing Yun sect members all turned pale with fright. Zhang Xiaofan and Tian Linger, Du Bishu almost at the same time, turned around and shouted towards Song Daran, "Big senior bro." Song Daran's forehead was dripping with sweat. If he decided to leave, he would not be able to convince everyone, and he himself would feel bad too, but to stay, it would most likely be disastrous. These few junior brothers and sister were young and ignorant, he had to think for their lives. For a moment, his mind was in a mess. But Lu Shuiqi, the speed of her driving the sword was unbelievably fast. In an instant she already charged near to where the evil faction's circle of light on the beach was, and the evil faction disciples also already realized something was amiss. Immediately shouts rise from all directions. Ghost King was still floating in the sky, his face was slowly regaining composure. Right then, he looked down and frowned. In a low voice he muttered one sentence, "Tianya celestial sword." The evil faction black-attired men were all in a fluster from Lu Shuiqi's sudden attack, and Ghost King, who was in the midair, also seemed not to be able to descend in time. Even the beast, who was trapped in the screen of light, also suddenly opened its eyes which had been closed all the while. Out of a sudden, halfway across, a clear light crossed over and abruptly blocked Lu Shuiqi. Tianya's celestial sword emitted a sharp sound and forced this ball of clear light back a little, but Lu Shuiqi's own figure was also immediately impeded from reaching that red light screen which was still several jongs away. Qing Long, still chic in a suit of white attire, but as if like a ghost, suddenly appeared in front of Lu Shuiqi. And at the same time, the right hand that wore the ring of universe clear light, again disappeared into his sleeve. "This lady," Qing Long smiled and seemed not to treat Lu Shuiqi as an enemy at all, said, "This Kuiniu was what we took a huge effort to trap it, also it did not cause any hindrance to your honorable sect, why must we start a dispute again?" Lu Shuiqi took a deep breath. She knew that the person in front of her, his level of attainment were immeasurable and she might not be his match. But when she looked around, and her sight landed on that beast, and the beast was also looking squarely at her, its eyes bright and piercing, and was still howling softly. Who was to really know what it was thinking at this moment? Evildoer, she exclaimed suddenly. Without any regards, the brilliant blue light of Tianya's celestial sword struck towards Qinglong. Qinglong was startled. Facing this celestial weapon, Tianya, no matter how high his skills were, he did not dare to underestimate. He only frowned and concentrated all his attention for battle. In the battlefield, the blue and clear lights immediately tussled together, but Qinglong after all was still higher skilled than Lu Shuiqi, and the ring of universe clear light did not appear to lose out to Tianya. After a short while, it gained advantage right away and the clear light gradually suppressed the blue light. Zhang Xiaofan saw it clearly, and was anxious in his heart. He turned around, Song Darren clenched his teeth and quickly said, "Little junior sister, you and junior brother immediately bring fourth brother away, Dubishu and I will go and assist. Once we have the chance to escape, we will come immediately." Tian Linger anxiously said, "Big senior brother, I." Song Darren glared at her and angrily said, "I don't have time to waste my breath with you, quickly go." Saying which, he called over Dubishu and immediately rushed towards the fight, leaving Zhang Xiaofan and Tian Linger standing there. Actually, if to go according to Song Darren's intention, originally he indeed did not want to meddle in this affair, but Lu Shuiqi was from his own sect after all, he could not leave her alone. But right now, the situation was fraught with danger. The other side in addition, had Ghost King and Qinglong, these two great evil. Left with no choice, he had to take his junior brother and sister into consideration first, checked out things on his own, and escaped if an opportunity arises. Tian Linger after being scolded by Song Darren, instead was dazed for a while. Ever since from young, Song Darren doted on her and never scolded her, not even a word. Today, he actually scolded her a sentence, she was still unable to react from it. But nevertheless, she was, after all, an outstanding disciple from Qingyun sect, also since young, she was eager to do well in everything and was also pampered. She frowned and thought deeply for a while, turned to Zhang Xiaofan and said, "Xiaofan, you stay here and look after fourth brother, I will go and help." Zhang Xiaofan was greatly surprised, and had not even spoke when Hidaji, who was injured and lying by the side, suddenly struggled and exclaimed, "Little junior sister, it is dangerous over there, you cannot go over." But Tian Linger once made up her mind, how could it be that she would listen to him? Unless Tian Buyi was there at that moment, he could still keep her in check. Hidaji's words, instead was unheeded by her. Hidaji at once saw that Tian Linger did not even pay attention to his words, turned and quickly spoke to Zhang Xiaofan, "Little junior brother, quickly hold on to her." Zhang Xiaofan roused with a start, hurriedly ran over and pulled on Tian Linger's sleeve, saying, "Senior sister, you don't go over, you stay here, I will go help." The word out had not even been said out, Tian Linger, who was feeling impatient, with a fling, she shook off Zhang Xiaofan. Zhang Xiaofan, in a moment of desperation, wanted to hold on to Tian Linger again. Unexpectedly at this moment, Tian Linger flung her hand and sword up at the same time, a very small circular item suddenly dropped from her sleeve. A beautiful and glossy stone, silently slid down in the dim light of the night. Indistinctly, there seemed to be a girl smiling lightly and saying, "Later when we get back, I will give this stone to Chi big brother, he will surely like it." He was suddenly dumbfounded, the hand that had rise into the mid-air, stopped where it was just like that, motionless. Until Hidaji who was behind, shouted loudly urgently, "Little junior brother, why didn't you hold on to her?" Zhang Xiaofan's body shook, he abruptly came to his senses, cold sweat broke out all over his body, and hastily looked over. Tian Linger was already driving the amber vermilion silk, flying towards the scene. At that moment, he did not even consider and hastily drove his firestick to give chase. Tian Linger flew midway into the sky, and saw that Song Darren and Du Bishu, who were ahead, had already joined Lu Shuiqi and Qing Ling's battle. But Qing Long, as 1 against 3, was not even being disadvantaged at the slightest, instead he looked calm and unhurried, battling with skill and ease. Although Tian Linger was impatient by nature but she was naturally gifted and clever. She could tell at once that Qing Long's was too highly skilled, plus his magical weapon was too powerful, even if she joined in, she herself might not win over him. Looking around, she immediately had other ideas. She did not fly towards Lu Shuiqi and the rest, instead shifted her direction, and quietly flew towards the other side of that enormous red screen. Zhang Xiaofan, who was following behind, turned pale with fright, but he saw that the evil faction members' attention were all concentrating on the battle of Qing Long as 1 against 3, even the one who was highest above them and presiding over the spell, Ghost King. His gaze was also following Lu Shuiqi's Tianya celestial sword and kept changing. For the moment, unexpectedly he also neglected to pay attention to where Tianlinger went to. In an instant Tianlinger was near the other side of the light screen. The black-attired men who were supposed to guard the area were already laying disordered on the ground. Evidently they were quaked to death during the earlier intense fight by the trapped Kui Niu. Tianlinger scanned the area quickly, and suddenly noticed that all of the red lights were projected from some strange dark red iron-all-looking items implanted in the sands, which continuously projected the lights up and converged into that ancient cauldron in the mid-air, under the Ghost King's feet. Clearly, the spell formation that was made up by these items, together with that ancient cauldron in the mid-air, was the crux of what was trapping Kui Niu. Tianlinger did not think twice. A stroke of her fair finger, the amber vermilion silk immediately flew out, sweeping directly at those things implanted in the sands. Bong! A loud sound sounded. The amber vermilion silk had struck onto one of the all that was shrouded by the screen of red light. Eastern Sea Kui Niu. In the Eastern Sea, 7,000 miles into the sea, there is Lu Bo Hill. On it there is a beast, strong like ox, dark green body with no horns, one-legged. There will be surely wind and rain when it enters or leave the water, its brightness like the sun and moon, its voice like thunder. Its name is called Kui. Divine and Evil the Strange. Spiritual Beast Chapter Kui Niu. Ancient times rare beast, its appearance is akin to a young calf, three-legged with no horns, roar like thunder. Resides for a long time in deep sea, only appeared born after 3,000 years. During birth appearance there will be wind and rain, thunder and lightning, also known in the world as the Thunder God's Mount. Here it is written using Classics of Mountains and Seas version. Chapter 73 Impasse. A wave of vibrations immediately passed through the screen of red light. Ghost King, who was in the air, and the rest of the evil faction black-attired men, including the trapped rare beast, Kui Niu, almost at the same time turned back to look. Red light flashed. Tianlinger was startled but saw that only the red lights surrounding that dark red all shuddered and flickered, but the all itself, instead was under the protection of the red light, and it did not even move a tiny bit. Within a short while, everyone gathered their senses and the evil faction black-attired men, one after another, charged over. Tianlinger turned pale and slightly gasped for breath. While she was panicking, a flash of light suddenly appeared in front of her. A wave of both hands, the amber vermilion silk, all of a sudden bore into the ground. In the mid-air, Ghost King's expression changed right away. He stamped his feet in anger and said, "Little servant girl, do not value her life, actually dare to mess up my plans." A flash of his figure and another flash, with unfathomable speed and ferocious strength, he pounced down, but also at the same time, from afar, sharp whistling sounds were heard one after another. Within a split second, numerous lights lighted up. The good faction disciples and the evil faction main forces had actually arrived at the place. The battle stopped and started. The most intensive ones were Taoist Kang Song with Bai Duji, Tian Buyi with Elder Duanmu. But at the same time, Suru was fighting as 1 against 2, obstructing the injured blood-sucking demon and the highly skilled young guy from the Forsaken Abyss that day, Lin Feng. As for the others, such as the monks from Tianyin Temple and disciples from Fenshang Valley, including Herald of Vigor Master and disciple, had all arrived here. With so many people arriving at this place, and suddenly noticing that there was such an enormous sheet of light wall on this beach, and a grotesque huge strange beast was also trapped in it, for a while, their hands slowed down. Bai Duji and Elder Duanmu leapt away at the same time, abandoning Taoist Kang Song and Tian Buyi. Taoist Kang Song and Tian Buyi at that moment too, were unable to focus on the battle and allowed them to get away. Especially Tian Buyi, looking far ahead, he saw that his own daughter was heavily surrounded by the evil faction disciples, and could not help but turn pale. He was about to prepare himself to dive over there. Bai Duji and Elder Duanmu stood together. At first they looked towards Qinglong's battle and saw that Qinglong, as 1 against 3, was still battling with ease and skill. Their face expression became different, huffed, and looked up at the sky. Currently they saw that Ghost King had dashed down, but that ancient cauldron was still slowly turning in the air, projecting red light in all 4 directions. Bai Duji suddenly frowned, and said in a low voice, "Hidden Dragon Cauldron." Quote. Elder Duanmu, who was beside, got a shock and quickly looked up into the sky. Immediately he was also stunned for a while. Both of them were among the evil faction's most senior disciples. Their experiences and knowledge were incomparable to the average evil faction disciples. Viewing that ancient cauldron far away, its outlook primitive and crude, both rings on the cauldron's sides were engraved with a relief sculpture of a dragon head, with the inclusion of the mysterious spell formation in front of them, it looked extremely like the evil faction's legend, Entrapped Dragon Watchtower. And for the mysterious Entrapped Dragon Watchtower spell formation, all along, only with the Hidden Dragon Cauldron, then the sorcery could be performed. With the Hidden Dragon Cauldron's spiritual power as the go-between, only then heaven and earth's austere energy would be triggered. Even how high the skills were, once trapped in it, it was impossible to escape. Speaking of which, if it was not for this kind of exceptional rare treasure, Ghost King and the rest who wanted to trap Kuei-Niu this type of ancient rare beast, it would be impossible to accomplish. Coming back to the scene, at this time, the rest of them who were fighting, had almost already temporarily stopped their fights, their attentions were all already drawn over here. Ghost King, who was rapidly charging down from the sky, and Tian Buyi, concerned about his beloved daughter, although he was physically still far but still he drove his sword and dashed over. And nearby, Zhang Xiaofan, because he was one of the earliest to follow, at the moment, he was the nearest person to Tian Linger. But beside him, several black-attired men had also already charged over. It was an explosive situation, and the crucial point was on Tian Linger. Zhang Xiaofan saw that the black-attired men were almost approaching, and felt very anxious. He leapt with his strength and flew near to Tian Linger's back. When he was in the air, the firestick was already brimming with green light and it swept a sheet of green light wall in front of the black-attired men. Odd cries were heard one after another from those black-attired men. In an instant, several magical weapons went over to attack. Zhang Xiaofan's body trembled greatly from the impact but eventually he managed to block off the attacks. Also at this imminent danger moment, Tian Linger gave a shout of joy. The amber vermilion silk bore out from the ground, carrying with it, a metal awl head. Suddenly, the red light's violent swayed, the entire Entrapped Dragon Watchtower spell formation electrical rays flickered madly and was in disarray. Especially the screen in front of Tian Linger, within a short while, a hole about as tall as a human, tore open abruptly. Within the red light screen, the strange beast Kuei-Niu gave a long cry. Shaking the surrounding grounds with its cry, its single leg exerted force, and started to charge over here. Tian Linger's face was full of joy and was about to call back the magical weapon amber vermilion silk when suddenly, she heard Zhang Xiaofan cried out behind her, "Senior sister, watch out." She was startled and looked up immediately. That enormous strange beast had already charged in front of her, a loud sound rumbled, that gigantic body slammed heavily against the light screen. By this time, the Entrapped Dragon Watchtower spell formation was already in a mess. With the additional massive force, the human-size hole immediately split open. In an instant it had become several times bigger and almost allowed Kuei-Niu to escape. And at the same time, the red lights quivered tremendously, projecting waves in all four directions. Unexpectedly it threw Ghost King, who was charging down, to the side. Right now, Kuei-Niu opened its enormous pair of eyes, shooting ominous glare everywhere, and without any regards that it was Tian Linger who disrupted this strange spell formation, with a roar and out swinging its huge head, it tried to bite Tian Linger. Tian Linger turned extremely pale with fright. She saw a huge predator mouth heading towards herself, the smell of raw fish overwhelming her. Momentarily she was dazed with shock and was unable to move. At the moment, it seemed Kuei-Niu was about to break out of the entrapment, after witnessing its strength and might from being able to cause the death of several people when it was trapped in the Entrapped Dragon Watchtower. All of the black-attired men subconsciously moved back at the same time. Only Zhang Xiaofan, although terrified, but still gritted his teeth and charged over. Green light flashing from the firestick, it hit towards Kuei-Niu's head. From far, Qing Long shook off Song Daren's 10 Tigers celestial sword, unintentionally glanced towards Zhang Xiaofan's direction and happened to see that firestick heading towards Kuei-Niu. Suddenly his body shook and he almost lost his focus. He involuntarily burst out, "This!" On scene, Kuei-Niu was indeed an ancient rare beast. It felt the magical weapon coming, swung its huge head and actually used its head to take on the firestick. A sound of bang, the firestick flew back and Zhang Xiaofan's body shook greatly. He only felt a surge of huge energy, almost like blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Translator's note, an idiom meaning earth-shattering or overwhelming, gushing over, and was forced back a few steps. With Zhang Xiaofan's attack, Tian Linger already recovered her senses. Her face still pale, she was about to retreat. Unexpectedly tonight, that Kuei-Niu was made a fool by these humans, even though it was not known how many several thousand years it had lived, but presumably it had never met such situation, and was extremely angry now. It did not care the identity of the human in front of it, it only wanted to kill in order to vent its anger first. Tian Linger was seen to be only retreating half a step, slowly summoning amber vermilion silk, and was planning to fly off, but that horrible bloody mouth again tried to bite down on her. Far off, the crowd cried out in surprise, Suru looking pale and Chihao rushed out at the same time. Foremost was Tian Buyi, who was already flying like the speed of light, but the distance was too far. Separated by a distance of several zhang more, it was difficult to render help. But Tian Linger, after all, was not those average disciples, and would not die helplessly. In a moment of desperation, both hands continued to gesture. The amber vermilion silk, like a red dragon flying in the sky, holding up at the top of her head and hoping to hold up this enormous beast in order to create a gap for her to escape. And standing nearest to her, Zhang Xiaofan, again leapt over. And not sure if it was because the amber vermilion silk's red light looked similar to that entrapped dragon watchtower's red light, the rage in Kui Niu's eyes was even more intense. An ow, it roared loudly, and as if the weight of Mount Tai bearing down, it bit down. As soon as contact was made, a battle of strength ensued. The amber vermilion silk was pushed down by Kui Niu's huge mouth, Tian Linger's face became pale with fright, both of her knees weakened, and was forced to sit down by the massive force. Dust flew everywhere, and at that moment, from the corner of her eye, she saw Zhang Xiaofan had already arrived in front of her. She urgently said, "Xiaofan, quickly leave." How would Zhang Xiaofan not know that this strange beast was too tyrannical to fight with, and there was only death for those who go against it? Unexpectedly at this moment, when the heaven and earth changed countenance, the sudden change of winds and clouds, in front of that ferocious enormous beast, the figure of that frail girl, instead anxiously calling out to him. "Quickly leave." The wind, blown onto his face. As if deep inside his heart, something was surging and stirring. That familiar figure and face since young, was just in front of you. The time spent over the past years, engraved in his heart, at that moment surged and rolled ceaselessly. What was it that made you desperately in love? What is it that made you felt anguished? When you thought of that heartbroken human skeleton in the blood drop cave? When you thought of the fox spirits in the fire dragon cave leaping together into the lava? He breathed deeply, panted heavily. Heaven, earth and the world, peaceful. Holding the fire stick tightly, gritting his teeth, that youth's figure, charged over. Just like that he charged over. Without having any regards, he charged over. Charging in between the enormous beast and Tian Linger, he spread out both of his hands and roared loudly, like a soldier meeting his death, like a grieved hero. Becoming one with the fire stick, it seemed as if 800 years of time appeared again. For whom do you break your heart? For whom do you go insane? While Kui Niu bellowed with rage, he was also hollering. The fire stick burned with a magnificent light that was never seen before, as if it was using its life as the firewood for the flame, burning furiously. Rumble. From the horizon, a sudden clap of thunder shook the firmament. Zhang Xiaofan's both knees weakened, dark red blood flowed out from the 7 apertures of his head, quietly slid down and dripped onto the fire stick. The shocked Tian Linger suddenly felt her body was being lifted, and flew backwards. Tian Buyi had arrived and pulled her out. Even though he turned back immediately, he was shocked to see that Zhang Xiaofan was already pressed down under Kui Niu's body. Kui Niu bellowed towards the sky, the entire huge body shot up into the air. The enormous single foot aimed directly onto Zhang Xiaofan. The immense strength of this might, everyone at the scene without exception were all shocked, even Tian Buyi's face turned pale. Zhang Xiaofan was panting heavily, the bones in his body felt like it was breaking in pieces. He slowly raised his head, the scene that filled his eyes were all the darkness that was pressing down on him from the sky. Dang, do not know, whose hand had lost control and dropped the weapon. And again who, crying out in despair within the darkness. A stream of golden, solemn ray of light, quietly set off, followed by a stream of green ray of light. The fire stick that was held in the youth's hand, numerous tiny red fine lines that looked like blood vessels, suddenly shone together. Under the shadow, the fresh blood flowed as if it was burning up life. Golden and green light rays interweaved and suddenly burst forth from the fire stick, reflected onto his face, gently in front of him. Above that green sinister orb on top of the fire stick, a Buddhist symbol appeared. Wan. Soon after that, as if coexisting with this symbol, underneath Wan, another Taiji image glimmering with green light faintly appeared. Everyone was stunned, except for Kui Niu, that furious huge beast, already stepping down with unstoppable force, that youth who was unable to escape, that youth who was facing death, stretched out his both hands and blocked the attack from above. Time seemed to stop for the moment. Heaven and earth wrestled, heavy dark clouds gathered again. Cold wind blew over gently. Fallen leaves, falling one after another. A figure suddenly appeared in midair, and pounced down urgently, with speed like lightning. It was indeed Ghost King. He was seen charging to the ground in a blink of an eye, snatched up the red-colored awl that was forced out by Tian Linger, and immediately stuck it onto the beach. At the same time, his right hand immediately stretched out, slashed his left wrist, and fresh blood at once spurted out and splashed onto the awl. In a flash, red rays flashed, on top of the dark red mysterious awl, red light shot out in 4 directions. In an instant, before Kui Niu landed, the lights merged with the surrounding light screen in front of Zhang Xiaofan, the entrapped dragon watchtower spell formation again restarted. In the midair, the hidden dragon cauldron shone with brilliant lights, lighting up half of the horizon. Rumble. Amidst the deafening sound, Kui Niu had slammed against the red light screen. Ghost King's body shook and was forced back several steps. But Kui Niu also received a shock from the red light screen, and immediately charged furiously again. But amid the ceaseless deafening sounds, it had finally become too exhausted to escape. Ghost King heaved a sigh of relief and slowly released the tension from his body. He turned over and saw that the youth was still maintaining the same position, preparing to ward off the attack. The fire stick's glow gradually disappeared, but looking at his face, with fresh blood dripping, carried a trace of desolation. Ghost King stared at him. Zhang Xiaofan opened his mouth slightly and also looked at him. The entire place had turned silent. Great Brahmin wisdom. This is the great Brahmin wisdom. Suddenly, from a distance behind, the monks from Tianyin Temple slowly emerged from the crowd, including Fa Shan. The monks were all appalled beyond words. Pointing at Zhang Xiaofan and questioning loudly, "How did you practice our Tianyin Temple's great Brahmin wisdom true way?" Only that Fa Shan stood silently behind the agitated crowd and stared at Zhang Xiaofan without uttering a word. A glint seemed to appear in his eyes. Zhang Xiaofan slowly turned over. It seemed that each movement caused him a great amount of energy, until he faced everyone. Tian Buyi was livid with rage. He stood there motionless, the hand that was clutching Scarlet Flame celestial sword was bulging with veins. All of the Qingyun sect disciples looked as if they were seeing a monster for the first time, stared in consternation at this person, this youth who was covered with cuts and bruises. From the back, a sound like Ghost King's deep sigh was heard. Tian Linger's face was terribly pale. She walked forward a few steps and suddenly stopped. The short distance between Zhang Xiaofan and her suddenly became so distant and impassable. "Xiaofan," she whispered, her voice seemed to convey that even she herself would not believe again, these masters said what was correct. Zhang Xiaofan's lips started to tremble, almost as if his deepest fear, from the depths of his heart, bit by bit, surfaced. He looked past Tian Linger, looked at his teacher, looked at his fellow sect disciples standing afar, everyone's expression were all so distant. He suddenly felt like screaming, but when he opened his mouth, not a word came out. The night wind blew and lifted his shirt, flapping gently. "That's right, it is the sinister orb, it can't be wrong." Suddenly, as if it was a never-ending nightmare, another exclamation again cried out. Qing Long stood at the side, his expression was in fact shocked. As soon as these words were said, everyone at the scene, regardless whether it was the evil faction or good faction, each and everyone's expressions changed. That circular pearl-looking object on top of the magical weapon in his hands, with blood streaks surrounding it. And earlier on against Kui Niu, it demonstrated the ability to devour. It must be Elder Blackheart's sinister orb from 800 years ago. The crowd was in an uproar, everyone's was astounded. Only Zhang Xiaofan, unable to hear anything anymore, not a single word anymore, he only felt that everyone around him were all making raucous noises, numerous people shouted and questioned him, but he could not hear anything. He slowly turned his body. Ghost King, unknowingly had already disappeared behind him. In front of him, only that strange beast Kui Niu who was trapped in the entrapped dragon watchtower spell formation, was turning round and round disorientedly, but eventually it still resigned to its fate. It stood motionless and cried towards the sky with a sound of despair. That sound, reverberated in the empty night sky, was particularly miserable. Zhang Xiaofan slowly lifted his head, and faced towards the sky. Ah, that bleak night light! Dark and endless, it seemed to make one breathless. He suddenly laughed despairingly, laughing in silence, his body swayed and fell straight, heavily onto the ground. In front of him, everything was in darkness, as if that endless dark night sky stretched over and pressed onto him. And then, he fainted. Chapter 74 UG. Note: Aunt Neger equals Aunt U, her name is UG. Just a few points: in Mui's translations, Dark Drake Cave was used for the fox spirits fight. But I went back to check, there were 2 caves mentioned instead of 1, so Dark Drake Cave was used for 2 different caves. The cave that Zhang Xiaofan went into, title of Mui's Chapter 8 Dark Drake Cave, is Black Stone Cave. The cave mentioned in Chapter 73 was referring to Fire Dragon Cave, where the 2 foxes were thrown into the lava. Li Su equals Li Xuan. Tana equals Xiao Huan. Tanis Ka equals Zhou Yixian. Xian in his name also means celestial being. Dui Al Shen equals Dao Zan. With this dream, 1,000 years seemed to go past. He was walking alone in the dark, until he saw that village, a familiar place full of bright sunshine. He sprinted over, those familiar faces smiling and looking at him, laughing and joking. The fresh air seemed to sweeten his heart, and allowed him to roll around freely and unrestrained on the grass patch beside the village, laughing to his heart content. Surrounding him, a number of children appeared suddenly and leapt over. That Jing Yu, who was always candid, laughed loudly and said, "Do you yield or not, yield or not? Yield or not," he muttered to himself, as though repeating the words said during that time. Heaven and earth suddenly became dark, dark clouds hung overhead, so low that it appeared that the sky had fallen. All of people surrounding him suddenly vanished, the warm village afar also suddenly disappeared. Darkness descended onto the earth, only a faint ray of light shone upon that frightened and helpless child. He suddenly cried out, "I yielded, I yielded." He turned around and sat up, his back was soaked in sweat and unable to stop panting. "Xiao Fan, what happened?" A familiar voice beside him sounded like the person was shocked, grabbed hold of Zhang Xiaofan's shoulders and asked urgently. While panting, Zhang Xiaofan looked beside him. Lin Jingyu sat in front of the bed, his face was anxious and slightly haggard, staring at himself. Zhang Xiaofan was stunned for a while, and looked around. This was a very small inn room with simple furnishings. There was only an ordinary table, chairs and a big bed. He himself was lying on the bed now, covered with a quilt. He lowered his head, steadied himself and said, "Nothing, I had a nightmare." Lin Jingyu looked at him, the corner of his lips twitched, and slowly loosened both of his hands. Zhang Xiaofan was silent for a while, and said, "Where are we?" Lin Jingyu hesitated for a while and said, "We had already left Lubo Hill, currently we have arrived at Changhe City located along East Ocean. This is a small inn in Changhe City." Zhang Xiaofan remained silent. The room suddenly became very quiet. After a long time, Lin Jingyu suddenly said, "Xiaofan, don't you have anything to tell me?" Zhang Xiaofan's shoulders seemed to shake for a while. He looked up at him, this childhood companion, right now was looking deeply at himself, but that kind of gaze instead looked so distant. He lowered his head again, slowly said, "Nothing, Jingyu." Lin Jingyu frowned, was about to say something but eventually held back. Another period of silence. Zhang Xiaofan spoke, "How did we come back?" Lin Jingyu sighed and said, "That day on Lubo Hill, after you had fainted, everyone looked at you. Your appearance," they looked at each other in blank dismay. "Finally my teacher, Uncle Teacher Tian and a few others discussed for a while and decided to bring you back first. There seemed to be some confusion within the evil faction sect too, and their attention seemed to be all on that strange beast, so they did not try to further obstruct us, therefore we managed to return to this Changhe city successfully." Zhang Xiaofan was silent for a while and said, "How long was I like this?" Lin Jingyu said, "Already 3 days." Zhang Xiaofan was silent again. Lin Jingyu looked at him, felt a surge of agitation and couldn't help but burst out, "Xiaofan, what actually happened to you? How did you have?" "Jingyu," Zhang Xiaofan suddenly shouted out loud, interrupted Lin Jingyu's question. Lin Jingyu froze and looked at him. Zhang Xiaofan's voice had also become slightly hoarse. Without looking at Lin Jingyu's expression, he only hung his head and spoke in a low voice, don't ask anymore, all right." Lin Jingyu gritted his teeth, stood up, looked at Zhang Xiaofan for a long time and finally turned around and walked out. But just as he was nearing the door, he suddenly turned around, faced Zhang Xiaofan and said, "Xiaofan, don't worry, regardless you are, whatever reasons, I believe you, I will definitely beg teacher to say a word for you." Zhang Xiaofan sat on the bed, motionless, as if he had not heard the words. Lin Jingyu looked at him again, turned around resolutely and walked out. Outside the door, it appeared that there were people standing there. Lin Jingyu spoke a few words to them quietly, and then the sound of his footsteps gradually faded away. Inside the room, it was really quiet. Unaware of how much time had passed, Zhang Xiaofan slowly lifted his head, lifted his quilt, and noticed that he was still wearing the same clothes as on Lubo Hill. Presumably nobody had changed it for him. He subconsciously reached and felt for the head of the bed, but suddenly his hand stopped in midair. It was empty there. The fire stick which accompanied him for all these years disappeared. He sat there in a daze, lips slightly quivering. Suddenly, he bolted out from the bed, headed straight for the room's door and jerked open the door. The two people standing outside the door turned back in astonishment. It was Song Darren and Du Bishu. Looking at Zhang Xiaofan, both of their expressions seemed a bit strange. Only after a long while, Du Bishu gave a dry laugh and said, Junior brother, you have woken up. A ray of sunlight, from the sky behind them, shone down and shone upon Zhang Xiaofan's face. Zhang Xiaofan suddenly felt faint, and his body swayed. Song Darren's face expression changed. Without thinking, he wanted to step forward and support, but the minute his hands stretched out, it withdrawn suddenly. Zhang Xiaofan was stunned. Looking at him, the big senior brother who had always doted on him since young, his face was as white as paper. Song Darren's corner of his mouth twitched. Eventually he still slowly said, Little junior brother, you are still wounded. It will be better if you stay in your room to heal. Don't wander out and walk. Zhang Xiaofan slowly withdrew his body back, was about to turn around, but as if he couldn't help it and suddenly said, Big senior brother, my fire stick. Song Darren and Du Bishu's expressions changed. After a while, Song Darren then said coolly, Little junior brother, your magical weapon has been kept by teacher temporarily. You don't have to worry. Zhang Xiaofan did not speak further, turned around and lightly closed the door. In another corner of the inn, inside a secluded room, Taoist Kang Song and Tian Buyi with Xiao Yikai, the three of them, sat there. On the table that was in between the three of them, a green-black fire stick was quietly lying there. Suddenly, a hand stretched over, and took the fire stick. It was Taoist Kang Song. He placed that fire stick in front of him, touching it lightly with his hand. When his hand touched the sinister orb at the extreme end, there was a glint of luster sparkling faintly in his eyes. After a long while, he said, So this is the sinister orb. Tian Buyi gave a cold snort. Xiao Yikai looked at Tian Buyi, and looked at Taoist Kang Song, and said, Both uncle teachers, what shall we do now? We'll like to seek your advice. Taoist Kang Song glanced at Xiao Yikai and said indifferently, Xiao nephew, you have always been resourceful and decisive, why not you give your ideas? Xiao Yikai shook his head and said, This matter is too serious, I too do not know what to say. Kang Song Taoist looked at Tian Buyi's livid expression and said, Currently the most complex issue is, those fellow practitioners from Tianyin Temple. They kept coming after us to ask how did Zhang Xiaofan practice the great Brahman wisdom true way. Their attitudes were agitated and fierce. If not for their in charge, Fa Shang, who is still sensible and tried his best to contain it, I'm afraid they would have long ago demanded us to hand over him. Tian Buyi coldly said, They want to take our people. They still have to wait until we find out the truth. Beside, it is our sect's disciple who got into trouble, it is not their business to meddle. Taoist Kang Song frowned, and wanted to say something but Xiao Yikai already spoken. Speaking of this, Tian uncle teacher, this morning I met Fenshang Valley's Li senior brother, he too asked us for him. Taoist Kang Song was stunned. Tian Buyi rolled his eyes and said angrily, What has it to do with Fenshang Valley again? Xiao Yikai spoke in a low voice, Tian uncle teacher, please don't be angry, actually I also feel that Fenshang Valley was being unreasonable. Li Shuan Li senior brother said, he had entered the evil fox's den's black stone cave together with Zhang junior brother to investigate and find one of their Fenshang Valley magical weapon. In the end, Zhang junior brother reached first, and when the rest of them arrived, the evil fox was already dead but the magical weapon was gone without a trace, and Zhang junior brother instead said he had never seen that magical weapon. At that time, they felt strange. It seemed now most probably Zhang junior brother stole. Pong, a loud sound. It was Tian Buyi, who in a fit of fury, slapped the table with a heavy palm. Ka, a few sounds were heard, the table swayed for a while and collapsed. The table legs had already been split by this blow. Xiao Yikai looked slightly awkward. Taoist Kang Song frowned. gave a snort of contempt and said, Fenshang Valley, these people obviously do not carry a good intention, this matter does not have any concrete evidence, we do not have to bother about them. Xiao Yikai nodded and continued, actually regarding Fenshang Valley, we can evade it for a while and it will be alright. But this time, Zhang Junior brother in front of everyone, a lot of our fellow faction had already one after another requested for our Qingyun sect to step out and give an explanation, to explain why 800 years ago evil faction's evil item will be with our Qingyun sect disciple. Tian Buyi clenched his hands, light sounds of Pai Pa could be heard from it, his expression was livid with rage. He scolded in a low voice, this little bastard. Taoist Kang Song slowly said, Tian Junior brother, you don't have to be so angry, nobody expect this too. Just that this time the matter is too serious, and it involved Tianyin Temple and the evil faction sect, this is not a small matter, I think we better hasten back and seek advice from our sect leader before making the final decision. Tian Buyi let out a deep breath, but after all he had practiced for many years, immediately he suppressed the rage in his heart, nodded his head and said, agreed. We shall set off now. After saying, his gaze turned to fall upon the firestick in Taoist Kang Song's hand. Unexpectedly Taoist Kang Song smiled lightly, and instead placed the firestick into his bosom. Tian Buyi's expression changed, Xiao Yisao who was beside also frowned, and said, Kang Song uncle teacher, the magical weapon. Taoist Kang Song waved his hand at him, turned and said to Tian Buyi, Tian Junior brother, your branch's disciple created such a big matter, which already caused us Qingyun sect to lose face in front of all the good faction sects, and even offended Tianyin Temple, I'm afraid you as the teacher have to bear some responsibility. Tian Buyi snorted, his nostrils flared and coldly said, so what then? Taoist Kang Song indifferently said, I am still in charge of the discipline in Qingyun sect, this evidence will be placed with me, I guess Tian Junior brother won't have any objections, right? Tian Buyi stared at Kang Song Taoist for a long while, suddenly stamped his feet and walked out furiously. On the streets of Changhe City, it was bustling with activity and people traveled to and fro as per normal day. Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan, the two of them stood at a corner at the start of the street, looked at a small inn with a board inscribed with the words, East Ocean Inn, in front of them, frowning together. Xiao Huan licked the candied haws in her hand, giving out a satisfying pen-pen sound, and casually said to Zhou Yixian, Grandpa, are you sure the people from Qingyun sect are staying here? Zhou Yixian nodded his head and said, don't talk nonsense, did you not see that those people coming in and out of the door are all real cultivators of Tao? After speaking, he muttered to himself, these people, after they left for Lubo Hill, they stayed away for so long, not sure that this time they are back, what was the outcome? Xiao Huan gave him an angry stare and said, I really can't figure you out, let's say you are from Qingyun sect. You yourself do not dare to go forward and claim your connection, let's say you are not. But why are you that concerned? Zhou Yixian stifled, angrily said, your grandpa, although disdain acknowledging these Qingyun sect juniors, that is because I have already looked past the worldly affairs, rather to be someone with scanty means, roaming freely all over the world, for the good of the common people, to do some. Xiao Huan turned around and walked away. Zhou Yixian's remaining boastful words were forcefully swallowed into his stomach, he snorted, gave a last look at the East Ocean Inn, turned around and walked away too. Xiao Huan continued talking while walking, you still have the cheek to say that, originally we also wanted to go to Lubo Hill to take a look, in the end after asking around in East Ocean side for several days, we couldn't even find a boatman to take us there. Zhou Yixian felt greatly embarrassed, gave a dry laugh and said, that is because these boatmen are not knowledgeable, how can they even not know where is Lubo Hill, all are good for nothing. Speaking at the same time, he thought if these matters were always brought up, inevitably he would lose all of his old face in front of his granddaughter. He then changed the topic and casually said, I wonder if that fellow called Zhang Xiaofan, this time will he die at Lubo Hill? Xiao Huan gave him a stare and said, don't talk nonsense, that day I read his palm, although this person has a unique horoscope, with a sign of Chaos Devil, but the expectancy of a life has no connection with one's fortune, he is not a person with short life. Zhou Yixian gave a laugh, and said to Xiao Huan, speaking of which, I became more and more curious to know, that day outside Black Stone Cave in that lunar ancient well, what did he actually see? Xiao Huan giggled and said, until now you still remember. Zhou Yixian nodded and said, that's right, you should know that someone with Chaos Devil sign is 1 in a million, I am now more and more curious about that fellow. Xiao Huan nodded her head in succession, laughed and said, actually me too. Both of them laughed and talked. For a moment they forgot to pay attention ahead. Out of a sudden they discovered a figure appeared in front of them, both of them almost collided with it. They had a fright and quickly controlled their bodies, with difficulty they managed to stabilize themselves. Zhou Yixian flew up in a rage and said, "What are you all doing?" Unexpectedly he had not even completed his sentence halfway, his voice immediately became mute. Xiao Huan was surprised, and looked up at the same time. Immediately she was also shocked. Two people were standing before them. Standing ahead was a delicate and beautiful young lady, attired in light green clothing. It was actually the person who made them suffered quite a lot of hardship, Bai Yao, and behind Bai Yao, there was another girl, but she was dressed in black, her face was also veiled in black veil, her facial features could not be clearly seen. Zhou Yixian laughed dryly twice and said, I was wrong, while saying, he looked at Xiao Huan and gestured with his eyes. Xiao Huan, although young but was quick-witted beyond her age, she understood immediately. Both of them was about to turn around and flee. Unexpectedly their bodies felt light, they were each being lifted up by one lady, following which their vision swayed. A few streets figures tossed and turned. When they regained their conscious, they were already at a deserted mean alley. Zhou Yixian's forehead was sweating. He knew that the lady in front of him was far more skilled than him. This time he did not know what hardship he had to go through. He could only give a bitter face and said, "This lady, that day it was all my fault. I give you back all of your silver. Please be magnanimous milady, let us go." Bai Yao frowned. Ever since she came back from Lubo Hill, looking at her face at the moment, she appeared rather wan and sallow. She gave Zhou Yixian a stare and said, "Who wants your silver? I will ask you a few questions, you honestly reply me." Zhou Yixian immediately said, "Miss, please ask, I will reply all according to the facts. Not sure if you wanted to ask regarding your fortune or longevity, if not about marriage. All these are Zhou Yixian, Great Zhou Immortal's specialty skills. Come, let me divine for you." The more he talked, the more eloquent he became. Unexpectedly beside him, he felt Xiao Huan constantly pulling his shirt. He turned back in surprise and asked, "What happened?" Xiao Huan was sweating, gave him a stare, and smiled obsequiously at Bai Yao and said, "This, beautiful big sister, what is it that you want to ask us?" Bai Yao was silent for a while, said, "Just now what were you all looking at in front of East Ocean Inn?" Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan looked at each other and said, Nothing, we just happened to pass by and saw a lot of cultivators there, so we stopped to look." Bai Yao indifferently said, "So, it means Qingyun sect, all of their members are staying there." Zhou Yixian nodded his head and said, "Seems to be." Bai Yao was silent again. After a long while, she said, "Then did you all see that Qingyun sect young disciple who once saved both of you?" Zhou Yixian was stunned momentarily but came to understand what she meant, said, "Miss, you mean that youth called Zhang Xiaofan?" Bai Yao did not expect that they actually knew Zhang Xiaofan's name, nodded her head, said, "Why? You all saw him." At the same time, her face expression showed her concern. Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan both shook their heads at the same time. Bai Yao immediately looked disappointed. She looked as if she wanted to say more but suddenly she seemed to lose all interest, waved her hand and said, "Both of you leave." The words were like heavenly music to Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan. Immediately they thanked her and quickened their steps to walk out of the small alley. Unexpectedly they had only walked a few steps. Behind them Bai Yao suddenly said, "Wait." Zhou Yixian's heart went thump. Bai Yao slowly said, "Just now on the main street, you were all talking about a lunar ancient well outside Blackstone Cave. What does that mean?" After hearing that, Zhou Yixian then was able to put down the stone in his heart. He quickly told her about lunar ancient well parable, and lastly said, that is all. Legend said that on a full moon night, one only has to gaze into the lunar ancient well and he will be able to see the person he loves most. Bai Yao's face expression changed, did not speak anymore, and appeared to be in a daze. Zhou Yixian was still thinking whether this ever-changing young girl still had any weird questions. Suddenly he was pulled by Xiao Huan, and saw her kept using her eyes to signal to him. He then regained his wits. Both of them slowly walked towards outside. However, Bai Yao and that mysterious black-attired girl beside her did not stop them. After like half a day, inside the deserted alley, only Bai Yao and that mysterious black-veiled girl remained. "And you, who do you think he saw?" She had only just spoken the words. Bai Yao suddenly gave a bitter laugh. In her laughter there were some degree of sourness. Do we still need to say, it must be his Linger senior sister? If not, it will be that rare beauty, the one from Qingyun sect who wield the Tianya celestial sword. What am I? The mysterious lady who was addressed as Aunt Yu by Bai Yao said indifferently, don't be like this, these men, sometimes they do not know exactly their own heart. Bai Yao closed her eyes, opened after a long while, carrying with it a faint plea, and spoke to the black-attired lady, Aunt Yu, I want to go and see him. The black-attired lady immediately shook her head, said, no. Bai Yao begged pitifully, Aunt Yu, his condition now, is really rather be dead than alive. I really cannot let go of this thought in my heart. The black-attired lady gave a soft sigh, said, your father also knew you will be impulsive, that is why he ordered me to look after you. Now that most of the highly skilled Qingyun members are inside the inn, if we go in rashly like this, we will surely be unable to avoid trouble. Speaking until here, her voice became more tender, softly said, Yaoer, there are still chances, we will surely see him again. Bai Yao stood there in a daze, spoke after a long interval, but he had committed a big taboo in the good faction, will they just kill him like that? The black-attired lady frowned, shook her head said, Bai Yao, come to your senses, usually you are not this muddled. Zhang Xiaofan currently, other than because he has the sinister orb and is suspected to be in league with our holy sect, the most important is, he actually practiced Tianyin Temple's great Brahmin wisdom. This is then the dire matter, if they are unable to get to the truth, firstly Tianyin Temple will not let Qingyun sect go off easily. I predict Qingyun sect will have to bring Zhang Xiaofan back to Qingyun Hill, and let Dao Zan personally interrogate and make the decision himself, so as to give Tianyin Temple a proper explanation, therefore he will be safe for now. Bai Yao subconsciously bit her pale lower lip, after a long while, there was still no reaction from her. The black-attired lady watched it all, and also seemed to feel some heart pain. She gently smoothed her hair and spoke in a reassuring low voice, it will be all right, don't worry, didn't your father also said it before, he will not sit by and do nothing. Bai Yao nodded, suddenly she lifted her head, grabbed the black-attired lady's hand and urgently said, Aunt Yu, I knew since long ago, you do not fight anymore, but I beg you, for my sake, please also help him. The black-attired lady was silent for a while, gently shifted her gaze away, looked towards the outside of the small alley. Bai Yao cried out again, Aunt Yu. The black-attired lady seemed to give a soft sigh and said, all right. If your father decide to save him, I will help you once. Bai Yao's face lit up with pleasure. The black-attired lady smiled, but nobody could see the smile that was hidden within the black veil, just like nobody could see deep inside her heart, the waves of ripples that were ruffled. In that dark and harsh night, when the youth who disregarded his life charged towards that huge ferocious beast, she in the dark, was captivated. From the vague memories, many years ago, that figure in white, clothing as white as snow. Even the expressions on their faces, had some degree of similarities. Chapter 75 Conspiracy. Isa equals Zheng Shushu. Ash equals Xiaowei also means little gray. Big yellow equals Dahuang also means big yellow. To view Qingyun again. When Zhang Xiaofan once again set his eyes upon Qingyun Hill, since the time when he left the mountain together with Lu Shuiqi, Qihao, Zheng Shushu, it had already been several months. That still as before majestic towering peak, reaching directly into the clouds, the usual magical misty breath, solemn and sacred, but Zhang Xiaofan's situation had totally changed. After Tian Buyi, Taoist Kang Song and Xiao Yikai's discussion, Zhang Xiaofan was brought back by Tian Buyi temporarily to Bamboo Peak, while Taoist Kang Song and Xiao Yikai went on to report the details to the sect head, Reverend Dao Zan, before making a decision. And Zhang Xiaofan, as he had lost the fire stick, on this journey, he was unable to use his spell to fly, therefore it was big senior brother Song Darren, who flew him all the way back. Bamboo Peak stood tall and erect, reaching into the clouds, with steep cliffs on all of its four sides. To Zhang Xiaofan who had lost his fire stick, it seemed like he was placed under house arrest. Streaks of light flashed by in waves, the Bamboo Peak generations, finally returned to the long-awaited Bamboo Peak. Zhang Xiaofan expressionlessly walked down from Big Senior Brother's 10 Tigers' celestial sword, which had came to a stop, and silently stood aside. Tian Buyi even more so did not even cast a glance at him, with a stony expression, entered the observed silence hall, directly. Coming down to greet them, the ones who were left to guard Bamboo Peak, Wuduya etc. were stunned momentarily, and looked at Suru and Song Darren with confused gazes. Suru sighed softly, shook her head, and also did not feel like saying more. She turned her head to speak to Song Darren. Darren, I leave here to you. Song Darren quickly acknowledged. Suru turned her head to look at Zhang Xiaofan, who was silently standing aside. His face was haggard, and within the last several days he had already lost a lot of weight. Looking at him, she could not help herself and stepped forward but stopped almost immediately. She shook her head and sighed, turned around and left. Tian Linger turned to glance at Zhang Xiaofan, and immediately followed after her mother without saying a word. Song Darren gave a dry laugh, with an odd expression on his face, spoke to Zhang Xiaofan, little junior brother, since we have already come back, go back to your room and rest. But, you better not wander unnecessary. Zhang Xiaofan raised his head, nodded slightly, said, big senior brother, I understand. After speaking, he walked alone towards Bamboo Peak Disciples' residences. He had not gone far when he heard low voices whispering behind him. Obviously, Wu Deya and the rest were filled with curiosity. They were now questioning Song Darren and Du Bishu in earnest. Although he did not see it, but those invisible stairs behind him were like needles, stabbing into his back. Just when he had walked a short distance, suddenly two happy barks sounded in the Bamboo Peak. Zhang Xiaofan was moved. He lifted his head to look ahead, and could not help but stared blankly for a moment. After not seeing each other for so long, the monkey, Xiao Wei, grinning and riding on the big dog, Da Huang's back, both hands clutching tightly onto Da Huang's glossy fur. And Da Huang, with half of its tongue rolling out, barking loudly and excitedly all the way, dashing forward. Zhang Xiaofan suddenly felt his eyes became warm, even his body was also slightly shaking. Soon, Da Huang arrived in front of Zhang Xiaofan. Xiao Wei Zizi gibbered constantly, a sound of whoosh, and it had scurried up onto Zhang Xiaofan's shoulder, laughing merrily. Both claws accustomedly started to grope everywhere on Zhang Xiaofan's head. As for Da Huang, it was also extremely affectionate towards Zhang Xiaofan, a big dog's head ceaselessly stroking Zhang Xiaofan's leg, rubbing here and there. Was it because he was missing Zhang Xiaofan's meat bone again? Zhang Xiaofan felt a surge of emotion in his heart, squatted down, and used his hand to gently caress Da Huang's head. Da Huang whined softly twice, both ears obediently drooped down, rubbed against Zhang Xiaofan's palm. And Xiao Wei Zizi laughed randomly, its tail swished here and there, wrapping tightly around Zhang Xiaofan. Wu Deya, who was standing afar, muttered a few words in a low voice. These two bastards. I, your father, take such good care of them for these few months, and have never seen them that enthusiastic towards me before. After a while, under everyone's attentive gazes, Zhang Xiaofan stood up and walked towards his residence. Xiao Wei sat on his shoulder and Big Huang followed behind. It seemed that only at this moment, the figure of Zhang Xiaofan did not appear to be that lonely. Somewhere at a distance from the foot of Qingyun Hill, Bai Yao and the mysterious black-attired lady, Yu Ji, were standing side by side, looking at the mountain summit hidden beneath the white clouds. Bai Yao's face looked slightly pale, her brows frowning, and she appeared to have lost some weight. She also seemed to be in a trance-like daze. After staring blankly for about half a day, she spoke slowly, I wonder how is he now? Yuji's black veil moved slightly. She turned and looked at this young lady beside her, who was tormented by love, and said softly, everything will be all right, Bai Yao, don't think so much. Bai Yao bit her lips and suddenly asked, where is my dad? Yuji replied, Zhang Zhu is going to Heyang City today to meet up with that old monster from Wandu clan who has arrived recently. Bai Yao was surprised and said, what, god of poison, also came? Yuji smirked, said, not only him, according to what I had heard privately, these few days, even the section heads from Chongshan Hall and Hehuan branch also have to come over. Bai Yao was even more shocked, and spoke only after a long while, why is it like this? I knew that Dad had already secretly shifted the main forces from Ghost King sect to Qingyun Hill surroundings. If these three section heads come, their sects, skilled fighters will also surely come. Then is it that our four big, no, basically our holy sect main strength are all concentrated here? After Yuji's face was hidden behind her black veil, her face expression could not be seen, but from her voice, it was still as smooth and calm, and she gently said, that's right. Bai Yao suddenly lowered her head, after a while, slowly said, so it means, the main purpose for Dad to come here, is not to save Zhang Xiaofan. Yuji replied dryly, Bai Yao, don't brood so much on it, Zhongju's words are worth 9 sacred tripods, and you are his only daughter, he will not lie to you. And this time our holy sect main branches are willing to meet together. It was all because of your dad who has spared no effort to advocate for it. To wipe away the great shame suffered 100 years ago, the section heads of the 4 branches stood together under the Mingwang throne and swore an oath to take the advantage when Qingyun is unprepared and make a surprise attack on them. Bai Yao was silent for a while, said, if this battle is successful, Dad's reputation within the holy sect will naturally increase, and even if he failed, he will also gain a good reputation for trying to erase the senior's shame. But, she suddenly raised her voice, her expression looked agitated and said, but all these I do not care, and do not wish to care for, I only wish for Zhang Xiaofan to be well, and not to. Bai Yao, Yu Ji suddenly shouted. Bai Yao was stunned, looked at her and eventually, kept quiet. She turned her head to look at the white clouds far away, staring blankly. In a deserted big mansion inside Heyang City, Ghost King and Qing Long unhurriedly stepped in, with someone respectfully guiding them in along the way, straight into the inner parts of the mansion. The mansion was naturally Wandu clan's stronghold in Heyang City, and on this day too, Wandu clan's head, the god of poison, who was the oldest qualified head among the 4 main branches in the evil faction, had also arrived. 100 years ago, in the big battle between evil faction and good faction on Qingyun Hill, fierce fighting took place but the evil faction eventually still lost. After the fight, the evil faction suffered heavy losses and among the 4 main branches, 3 leaders were replaced, and it was also during this time, Ghost King took over the head position of the Ghost King branch. But among the branches, only the old monster, god of poison, of Wandu clan, was fortunate to survive, only that in the recent few years, he was not his past style of being arrogant and obtruding. Even within the evil faction, Wandu clan stayed surprisingly low-keyed, not to say the ordinary disciples would not even have a chance to see this old monster. Thinking of this, Qing Long could not help but frown slightly. The title, God of Poison, had already resounded within the evil faction even before 100 years ago. When he was still following the previous Ghost King to conquer the world, this god of poison was already a capable disciple within Wandu clan, and subsequently took over Wandu clan's head position. Within evil faction, he vied fiercely with Ghost King sect. Between them, who would know the number of hidden feuds still unsettled? Unexpectedly, things had changed with time, and now they would work together with this old monster. Qing Long had also not seen the god of poison almost near to 100 years. He was indeed curious, after all these years, how had the god of poison turned into? If according to the calculation of his age, this old monster would be nearing to almost 500 years old already. Thinking of which, he suddenly had a thought, looking at Ghost King who was walking half a body length ahead of him, a slight smile on his lips and his expression relaxed, but however he might, he was unable to guess, what was Ghost King thinking in his heart. On the way in, they walked past the courtyard and entered the inner main room of the house. The surroundings were quiet and tranquil, and not a human in sight. For a person of high authority and position, it was surprisingly deserted. Soon, they arrived at the door of an ordinary-looking single-story house. 8 men wearing the same yellowish-brown uniform were standing outside it, and the person who was leading the way, led them to walk towards that house. It seemed like the god of poison should be in this room. When they were nearing, the 8 men bowed to Ghost King together. It was obvious that Ghost King, as the head of one of the 4 main branches in evil faction, his position was the highest. However, Ghost King did not carry any haughty or conceited air. He nodded slightly to the men, amiably smiled and entered with Qing Long. Inside the room, the windows facing east to the west were all opened, the sunlight streamed in, it was bright inside the room. There was none of the sayings which claimed that people of the evil faction always stayed in the darkness. As for the furnishings, it was even more simpler. In the middle of such a big house, there was only a table and a few chairs. There was a reclining chair beside the table. An old man with a head full of hair as white as snow was lying on it. Beside him, a fair face of age around 20-odd young man was sitting beside him, arranging the tea set on the table. The tea fragrance could be smelled from time to time. Looking at it, it looked like a tranquil picture of grandfather and grandson having a rest. Where do you find a single trace of evil? Ghost King smiled slightly, walked over. That old man heard footsteps, opened his eyes, and looked over at Ghost King. A smile immediately appeared on his face. He said, "You came." Ghost King smiled and replied, "Senior, since we parted at the Holy Temple, we have not met for a long time. How is your health?" This old man was obviously the renowned evil known throughout the world, god of poison. His expression seemed to carry a bitter smile and said, "Old, and useless." After which, he seemed not to want to talk about this anymore. he changed the topic and said, Ghost King old brother, now that you are already head of the Ghost King branch, your status is the same as me. If you do not mind, you can call me elder brother. Please do not call me titles like senior anymore, I am not worthy of it. Ghost King laughed in spite of himself. His expression relaxed, sat down on the other side of the table and said to God of Poison, Senior, your words are wrong. Who would not know that you are someone of noble character and high prestige? Regarding the big matter this time, we are still counting on you to take charge of the overall situation. God of Poison looked stunned, and immediately shook his head and said, Won't do, won't do. Ghost King looked as if he wanted to say more. At this time, the young man at the other side of the table had already prepared 2 cups of tea, and brought it over. He said, Zongzu, Qinglong Holy Envoy, please have tea. Ghost King and Qinglong both stretched their hands to take the cups. Ghost King took a few more look at him, and saw that this young man's features were delicate, only that his face looked slightly pale, but to be able to accompany the God of Poison, obviously his relationship with God of Poison would not be simple. Ghost King immediately turned and asked God of Poison, This is? Ghost King smiled and said, He is my last disciple whom I have taken 10 years ago. His name is Qin Wuyan. At that time I noticed his aptitude is not bad, so I took him in. Wuyan, quickly greet these 2 seniors. They are our holy sect renowned figures. If you could receive their care in the future, it is better than you painstakingly practiced for another 100 years. Qin Wuyan lowered his head slightly. Nobody could tell if he was proud or shy from his face expression. Even his voice did not change too. It was still calm and smooth. He softly said, Greetings to Zongzu, Holy Envoy. I did not know my manners just now. I hope both of you do not mind. Ghost King he laughed, shook his hand. Qinglong also smiled and said, This young brother is able to learn from the God of Poison. He will have boundless prospects in the future. God of Poison he laughed and said to both of them, The child does not know his manners. Please do not mind. Ghost King shook his hand, smiled and said, You are too formal. He paused for a while and said again, But senior, today I really come to sincerely invite you to take charge of the situation. Our 4 main branches are joining hands together, to clean off that big failure at Qingyun, where our holy sect was insulted and humiliated beyond words. God of Poison was silent for a while, his expression looked slightly bleak. After a long time he then said, Old brother, I am already half handicapped, I am really not much use. This time, our 4 branches conspired together to attack Qingyun. Naturally I cannot be left behind, if not I will be letting both Saints, Wisdom Queen and Wisdom King, down, and even more towards Holy Sect's generation of founders. Just that the leader of this exercise. I think other than you, old brother, a man of great talent and courage, there is simply no one suitable at all. Ghost King frowned, shook his head and said, Senior, you overpraised me. Among the 4 branches, my qualifications is the lowest. How can I take on the role? Let's do it like this. We will wait for Chongshen Hall's, Yu Yangzi, and Heihuan branches, 3 seconds ferry, to arrive, then we discussed again. God of Poison was silent for a while and said, This suggestion is good too. They should be here in a few days' time. We will gather again at that time. Our holy sect's 100 years of insult and deep humiliation, this time round we must get it back from Qingyun sect. Ghost King smiled, sat for a while and chatted a few words more, and after that, left with Qinglong. The God of Poison did not force them to stay on and ordered his men to send them off. After leaving God of Poison's mansion, Ghost King and Qinglong, the 2 of them, merged into Heyang City's crowd. Ghost King suddenly sneered and said, This old monster is really getting harder and harder to deal with. These words were said without rhyme or reason, but Qinglong seemed to understand what he was referring to, nodded his head and said, That's right, 300 years ago when our Ghost King clan with Wandu sect were fighting to death, the old monster was the most malicious and impulsive. He was always the first on the front line. Even 100 years ago, Qingyun, that big battle, it was also him as the head of Wandu sect, who advocated it strongly. It seemed like that crushing defeat had toned down much of his drive. Ghost King shook his head and said, This is not called toned down, this is called capabilities grown. After going through that battle, the old monster seemed to totally gain enlightenment. His temperament changed completely, concealing his strength and biding his time. These 100 years, other than our Ghost King clan, Wandu sect was the fastest to recover back their strength. Just that he refused this position, it is indeed very troublesome. Saying which, Ghost King frowned and said dryly, Forget it, anyway we have to wait for the other 2 to arrive before we can discuss the important matter. Let's wait a few more days. Right, Bai Yao. It seems like I didn't see her for the whole day. Qing Long replied, I didn't see her too, but Yuji has been accompanying her, shouldn't have any problem, don't worry. Ghost King shook his head, softly sighed and did not say any more. After watching Ghost King and Qing Long's figures disappeared, God of Poison, whose expression all along had been gentle and even carried a bit of kindness, gradually darkened, but for half a day, he did not say anything. As for the young man beside him, his character was even more odd. Even if God of Poison did not speak to him, he took pleasure in what he was doing, patiently preparing the tea on the table. There was no hint of impatience on his expression. After like ages, God of Poison suddenly heaved a deep sigh and said, the new is constantly replacing the old. That young man called Qin Wuyan turned his head over, took a look at God of Poison and said coolly, oh. Is that person's skills powerful? God of Poison snorted and said, his training and skills are naturally high, but even how high his skills will be, we do not fear him, just that this person is too shrewd, you must take precautions in the future. Qin Wuyan smiled slightly, his tone still calm, and said, yes I know, teacher. God of Poison looked at him, and exclaimed suddenly, if only your good-for-nothing senior brothers can have your aptitude, why would I need to wait bitterly for these many years? Even when Qin Wuyan received praise from God of Poison, his face did not have any conceited expression. He coolly said, the few senior brothers are all doing their best to work for you, teacher. God of Poison snorted, suddenly stretched his hand to pull off the woolen blanket off his lap, and actually stood up from the chair. His physique was in fact quite tall and big, his back straight. Where did it show that he was sick at all? It looked like all of the actions earlier were all done to deceive Ghost King and Qing Long. God of Poison paced back and forth in the middle of the house. Qin Wuyan instead was much more quieter than his teacher. The only sound heard was God of Poison's footsteps. At this time, suddenly, beside Qin Wuyan, a strange sound sounded. It was similar to the ear-piercing sounds made by cicadas in the summer. God of Poison's expression changed. He turned to look. Qin Wuyan took out a yellow box from below his seat. One Kai translator's note, a traditional unit of length square. The strange sound came from this. God of Poison walked over, stretched out his hand to gently open the cover. Impressively in front of them, on top of the yellow soft silk cloth in the box, lay a magnificent colored centipede, but the most unusual part was, the centipede's tail was split into 7. If Zhang Xiaofan was to see this thing now, he would be shocked beyond description, because he had seen this thing when he was young. It was one of the world's most extremely poisonous, 7-tailed centipede. Qin Wuyan frowned and said, ever since we have arrived near Qingyun Hill, Xiaoqi seemed restless, as if it has been agitated. God of Poison looked closely at this 7-tailed centipede, and took out a small light purple medicine pill from his bosom, placed it inside the box and closed the lid. Very soon, that strange sound that was emitting from the box, gradually lowered down and disappeared. After Qin Wuyan had carefully put away the box with 7-tailed centipede in it, God of Poison calmly said, this 7-tailed centipede is one of the rare creatures in the world. There is only one pair left and they have always accompanied each other until death. If they are separated, but within 100 miles, they can sense each other. These few days that Xiaoqi was being restless, must be because of this. Qin Wuyan looked at God of Poison, suddenly said, so it means, now that that person is at Qingyun Hill. God of Poison laughed and said, that is right, the 7-tailed centipede is one of its only kind in the whole world, it cannot be wrong. After speaking, he turned his head around, gazed deeply far away. In the far place, that lofty majestic Qingyun Hill outside Heyang City, soaring through the clouds, its might and power almost unequaled in the world, white clouds swirling around it with the presence of heavenly aura. 100 years already, turn of an eye, it's another 100 years. This old man muttered to himself in a low voice. Chapter 76 Impasse. At Qingyun Hill Big Bamboo Valley. Zhang Xiaofan dully sat in his own room, staring blankly. It was a bright and sunny afternoon. Gentle rays of light streamed in from the room's window and shone upon the green stone floor. Maybe it was also because the air carried a sluggish feel. Da Huang and Xiao Wei in the room also seemed to be listless. Da Wang lay beside Zhang Xiaofan's feet, and buried its head between its two front paws. Its eyes were half closed, its ears were also drooping down, and from its head to tail, only its glossy fur tail swung occasionally. And even the usual energetic monkey, Xiao Wei, was also lying on Da Huang's body at this moment. Using Da Huang's stomach as pillow, its eyes were closed and in a deep sleep. And its body, following Da Huang's stomach's breathing, moved slightly up and down. This peaceful afternoon seemed like everything were as before, exactly the same. Zhang Xiaofan's eyes were fixed into a stare into the unknown. This was already the third day of his return to Qingyun Hill. Suddenly, as if it had sensed something, Da Huang, who had been drowsing off, suddenly lifted its head up, both of its eyes opened and even its ears were standing straight up. Zhang Xiaofan frowned, and heard slow footsteps outside the door. Soon, a creaking sound was heard and the door was being pushed open. The sunlight streamed in and for a moment the lights were blinding. Zhang Xiaofan only saw a figure standing outside the door, bathing in the sunlight. Until after his eyes adjusted to the brightness, his face immediately turned pale. Tian Buyi's face was solemn, standing at the door. In these 3 days, this is the first time Tian Buyi had came to see him, and other than the one who delivered his meals to him, big senior brother Song Darren, he was the first person. He guessed that the rest of them, due to the strict orders from Tian Buyi, were unable to visit. By this time, Da Huang had already ran over, his tail wagging vigorously, rubbing itself here and there on Tian Buyi's legs, and appeared to be extremely delighted. But the other animal, Xiao Wei, did not seem to feel the same, instead appeared to have been disrupted from a good dream and looked indignant. It screeched out twice, but after all it knew that Tian Buyi was not someone it could offend, so it did not dare to go forward and behaved impudently. After screeching out a few times, Xiao Wei swaggered and leapt back to Zhang Xiaofan's bed, leaned against the blanket and fell asleep again. Tian Buyi bended his body, looked at Da Huang who was beside his legs, stretched out his hand and smoothed its head. Da Huang barked softly twice and used its head to rub his palm. Tian Buyi patted Da Huang's head, stood upright and looked at Zhang Xiaofan. Zhang Xiaofan did not dare to look directly at him, and softly called out, "Teacher." Tian Buyi looked at him for a while, did not acknowledge and slowly walked nearer. Zhang Xiaofan subconsciously moved back a step. But Tian Buyi did not do anything, and only slowly sat down on the chair. Zhang Xiaofan felt some apprehension, but even more than that, he was at a loss for words and at his wits' end. Actually, ever since he had returned, he had expected to face such a situation, even to the extent that he would face interrogation from even more people. He was already mentally prepared. But, on this warm and quiet afternoon, when the person whom he had been worshipping like God for all these years, Tian Buyi, silently sitting in front of him, he could only bow his head low, his mind in a blank and unable to utter a single word. Without knowing how much time had passed before he heard Tian Buyi slowly said, "Lao Qi." Translator's note: it means number 7. Zhang Xiaofan's body shivered, and almost like a conditional reflex, he replied, "Yes, teacher." "Do you have any words that you wish to say to me?" Zhang Xiaofan slowly lifted his head, looked at Tian Buyi. Tian Buyi expressionlessly looked back at him. He was unable to presume what he was thinking about. After a long silence, Zhang Xiaofan slowly shook his head. Tian Buyi stared at this disciple, his hand which was huddled inside his sleeve slowly curled up into a fist. Just now, Tian Buyi slowly spoke, as if as only this way, he could hide the feelings in his heart. This morning Chihao from Longshou Valley sent a message. Early tomorrow morning, our sect head, Reverend Dao Zan, wants to meet you at Tong Tian Peak, Yuqing Hall. Zhang Xiaofan's body shook slightly. In the end, he still have to face it. The cool mountain breeze gently blew in from the door that was left opened. The wind seemed to carry with it the rustling sounds from the bamboo forest far away. But, the people in the room, instead did not feel anything. Xiao Wei seemed to fall asleep again, Big Huang too lay down again and did not bother them. Only Tian Buyi was still staring attentively at this disciple. Staring deeply, deeply at him. "These few days, did those senior brothers of yours neglect you?" Zhang Xiaofan shook his head and said, "No, all of the senior brothers treated me well." Tian Buyi did not speak anymore. The room became silent again. After a long while, Tian Buyi suddenly heaved a long sigh, and looked as if he had made up his mind on something, flung his head back and stood up. Without even turning his head, he walked towards the door without a word. Zhang Xiaofan stared at that familiar back figure, at a loss. Just when Tian Buyi was about to step out of the room, he suddenly stopped, but he still did not turn his head. Zhang Xiaofan, as if in a trance, called out, "Teacher." "Lao Qi." Tian Buyi's voice was still steady, but behind it instead, an indistinct flow of unusual emotions. "I will ask you for the last time, are you really the spy sent from other sects to pry on our Qingyun secret skills?" Zhang Xiaofan bit his lips, slowly kneeled in front of him. Teacher, I have not done anything to let you down. He spoke in a low voice to Tian Buyi, also as if at the same time speaking to the depths of his heart, speaking with resolution and finality. In the sunlight, there seemed to be a sound of gentle soft sigh. When Zhang Xiaofan lifted his head again, that familiar figure had already disappeared. Zhang Xiaofan stared blankly at the door, and after remaining that way for a long time, he then slowly stood up, walked back to his bed and sat down. The monkey, Xiao Wei, was roused suddenly up by his actions, turned its head over, saw that it was Zhang Xiaofan, split his lips and smiled. As if after the nap, it had regained its energy, and like energetic as usual, jumped onto him. Zhang Xiaofan subconsciously pulled his hand over and hugged Xiao Wei, but his gaze still remained on outside the door. After a long while, then he, using only the voice that he himself, or maybe including Xiao Wei, could hear, spoke quietly, "You know right, I promised that person before, until death I will not say, until death I will not say." Not knowing whether Xiao Wei understood, but it obviously did not appear to mind, stretched out its hands and intimately scratched Zhang Xiaofan's hair. Zhang Xiaofan did not move, and let Xiao Wei do what it wanted. He only slowly said, "Only you, Xiao Wei, now only you are by my side." Xiao Wei Zizi called out twice. He laughed, and not knowing whether it really understood. And at a distance away, Big Huang seemed to fall asleep again. In its dream, its tail curled up slightly, and withdrew back under its body. The sun as usual gently shone down. Du Bishu, who was standing outside the door, could not help but opened his mouth and yawned. But in an instant, the initial slight drowsiness felt disappeared. Tian Buyi was seen slowly walking out from Zhang Xiaofan's residence. "Teacher," Du Bishu called out, and at the same time, carefully watched Tian Buyi's expression, hoping to read something from it. However, Tian Buyi's face was expressionless, only nodded his head slightly and walked past him like that, walking towards observed silence hall. Du Bishu respectfully stood aside, until Tian Buyi was far away, and looked at his departing figure. But in his heart instead, he was thinking about Zhang Xiaofan, and cannot help but heaved a sigh. At Big Bamboo Valley, nobody expected that such a thing would happen to this former ordinary little junior brother. At this very moment, even the former usual energetic him, also could not help but felt listless. In his heart, he was even more worried about Zhang Xiaofan. Lost in his thoughts, without knowing how much time had passed, until a voice was heard from behind, "Sixth senior brother." Du Bishu was startled, turned his head over and was stunned, without knowing when, Zhang Xiaofan had walked out from his room and stood behind him. The monkey, Xiao Wei, lay on his shoulder and was grinning at him. Only Da Huang did not follow them out, most likely it was still asleep. Little junior brother. Du Bishu frowned and said, "Is anything the matter?" Zhang Xiaofan looked at him and slowly said, "Sixth senior brother, I will like to take a walk at the back of the hill." Du Bishu heard what he said and was speechless. In his heart he felt awkward. Ever since they had returned to the mountain, although Tian Buyi did not expressly order them to supervise Zhang Xiaofan, but Xiniang translator's note, teacher's wife, had already instructed the rest on the sly. Just that right now, looking at his little junior brother, who had always been honest, with his haggard face, Du Bishu, in his heart he was somewhat unwilling. But in any case, he did not dare to disobey his teacher's intentions. After a long while he then hemmed and hawed and said, "Little junior brother, you know now, I." Zhang Xiaofan silently hung his head, softly said, "Tomorrow's sect head, Reverend Dao Zan uncle, wants me to go to Tong Tian Peak. I just thought to go see the past places once more." Du Bishu's body shook and slightly opened his mouth. Suddenly, without knowing why, he felt his eyes became warm. Right now the youth that was standing in front of him seemed to turn into that ordinary boy who had just came up the hill many years ago, at the dinner table, the scene where he was betting with him on whom in teacher's family would first go into the kitchen. But teacher's command, whatever happens, he did not dare to disobey. Just when he was in this difficult situation, suddenly he heard footsteps. Both of them turned their heads. It was instead Tian Linger, whom had a mixed emotions expression on her face, walking over. In these 3 days, this was Zhang Xiaofan's first time meeting Tian Linger. Her face was slightly pale, and seemed haggard. It must be that these few days she was also worried. Just that in this sunlight, she was still as beautiful. Zhang Xiaofan hung his head. First time saw Tian Linger, her face was pale, and seemed a bit haggard. It must be these few days, she must have not felt secure, but in this sunlight, she still looked beautiful as ever. Zhang Xiaofan bowed his head. Tian Linger walked to where both of them were, and faced Du Bishu, but her sight from the corner of her eyes was always on Zhang Xiaofan, said, "Sixth senior brother, my dad said already, Xiaofan he will not do anything, let him go ba." Du Bishu was stunned. Zhang Xiaofan's body also seemed to receive a shock, slowly turned his body towards observed silence hall's direction to look, but he could only see that the hall's entrance was deep inside, no sign of Tian Buyi's figure. Zhang Xiaofan slowly bowed once towards observed silence hall's direction, spoke in a low voice which seemed to be choked with sobs, said, "Thank you teacher." Tian Linger stood aside. She seemed to wish to speak but eventually did not say anything, pressed her lips tightly, turned and walked back. Looking at her until she was far away, Du Bishu suddenly said, "No wonder this morning little junior sister in Longshou Valley Chihao had a big quarrel." Zhang Xiaofan was startled, said, "What?" Du Bishu said, "Chihao's senior brother made a trip here in the morning. After speaking with teacher and Xiniang, little junior sister pulled him aside. Unexpectedly not after. Seemed like little junior sister said something which made Chihao's senior brother in a difficult situation, then little junior sister flared up." Du Bishu paused for a while, glanced at Zhang Xiaofan, and continued, "I guessed she must have want Chihao's senior brother to go to Kengsong teacher uncle and plea on your behalf, they must have quarreled because of that." Zhang Xiaofan gave a bitter laugh softly, and also did not know what to reply, shook his head and walked towards the back of the hill. Du Bishu watched his figure from the back, but when he saw the monkey, Xiao Wei, crouching on his shoulder, playing and messing with his hair from time to time, the image looked rather amusing. Just that when he thought of Zhang Xiaofan's fate after tomorrow, he couldn't help but frown and sighed deeply. The forest trail that lead to the back of Big Bamboo Valley, Zhang Xiaofan had not walked on it for a very long time. On his way there, the roadsides were filled with greenery, the birds chirping far away could be heard from time to time. The oncoming breeze from the valley blew onto his face, bringing a touch of coolness. Following the crooked small path, it felt like he was back in the past again. Nothing here had changed at all. Even the faraway white clouds, floating in the middle of the Big Bamboo Valley mountain, also seemed to look exactly the same as that year. Monkey Xiao Wei looked extremely delighted, immediately jumped down from Zhang Xiaofan's shoulder, Ji calling out, burrowed into the grass at the side of the path, and suddenly climbed up a big tree, swinging here and there at the top. Zhang Xiaofan looked at it and could not help but broke out into a slight smile. As he recalled back the scene where he had met Xiao Wei that year, it was as if the heavyweight in his heart had lifted slightly. He walked and walked, Xiao Wei was just at the top of his head, scuttling excitedly here and there in the trees' tops, but Zhang Xiaofan's gaze, gradually instead only looked ahead, that stretch of clear, green bamboo forest. How many memories, solidified here. In front of the bamboo forest, he stopped his footsteps. The valley breeze blew over, countless black bamboos danced to the wind, wah-wah sounds, as if they were too welcoming an old friend back. Zhang Xiaofan took a deep breath. The world at that moment, the air was made up of a fresh, sweet bamboo and freedom that only belonged there. Then he walked in. The green bamboo forest was as dense as before. On the soil ground below those tall green bamboos, even more numerous bamboo shoots sprouted out from the ground, growing freely everywhere. Unknowingly, he had walked to the same place where he had practiced chopping down the bamboos, just that those thin black bamboos had become twice as thick now. The shadows of the bamboos whirled, bamboos moved in waves, all seemed to cluster around him. The past was like a surge of tide wave, gushed into his heart. He stared blankly at everything around him, as if he had gone imbecile. Zhang Xiaofan. Suddenly, a gentle and slightly surprised shout called out from the depths of the bamboo forest. Zhang Xiaofan's body shook, the sound of the voice was so familiar, but he could never imagine that he would hear this voice at this place. He immediately turned and looked towards the direction of the voice, and his breath stopped. In the sea of bamboos, Bai Yao with her water-green dress which blended seamlessly with the surrounding, dainty smiling and standing there, so very tenderly, so very infatuatedly, looking at himself. You how did you get here?" After looking fixedly at each other for a very long time like two fools, Zhang Xiaofan stammered and asked. Bai Yao slowly walked over, even her eyes contained her gentle smiling expression, softly said, "I came to see you." Zhang Xiaofan's heart was agitated, subconsciously he bit his lower lips, after a while he then said, "But, what if you are seen by someone else, it is too dangerous for you." Bai Yao shook her head, "I don't care, I only want to take a look at you." Zhang Xiaofan's body shook, This was in fact the first time he heard Bai Yao confessed her feelings this frankly. She seemed to notice Zhang Xiaofan's surprise, her face became red too, and quickly added, your Qing Yun sect these 100 over years have always been secure and stable like a mountain, and since long ago have already relaxed your defenses, I came up the mountain secretly and didn't seem like anyone noticed. Zhang Xiaofan silently nodded his head, but suddenly a thought just flashed by. Now that there was no one in good faction who did not know that Bai Yao was evil faction Ghost King sect head's daughter, if right now he was to be discovered having a conversation with her again, then he did not even have to ask what would be the consequences. Bai Yao was clever beyond description. She saw at once Zhang Xiaofan appeared to be worried. Her smiling expression gradually turned into dejection, softly said, if you are worried, I shall leave then. Zhang Xiaofan looked at her, although Bai Yao's face expression contained her happiness but it could not hide those traces of haggardness. He guessed that it must have resulted from being worried about him these past few days. Suddenly, his heart became warm and unwittingly blurted out, what can I be worried about, can I be even worse? Bai Yao stunned for a moment and looked at him. Zhang Xiaofan gave a bitter smile and said, it is all right, nobody will come here now anyway, why don't you accompany me to chat? Bai Yao's facial expression turned radiant, she nodded her head and said, all right. But after saying this sentence, the two of them gazed at each other but did not know what to say. The ambience suddenly cooled down, with a touch of awkwardness. After a long while, Bai Yao scolded him, idiot, say something. Zhang Xiaofan scratched his head but his mind was in a blank, he really did not know what to say to this beautiful girl. It happened that from the corner of his eyes, he saw it not too far away, there was a section of black bamboos which were lying on the ground, most likely it had rot over the years and fell over. He walked over and stammered, you should sit. Bai Yao could not help but giggled, like a flower burst forth, her elegant and exquisiteness unparalleled. She walked over and was about to sit down when Zhang Xiaofan suddenly pulled her back and said, wait. Bai Yao was surprised and said, what happened? Zhang Xiaofan bent over, using his sleeve and wiped hard on the black bamboo, cleaning up an area. He got up, without looking at Bai Yao, lowered his head and said, you can sit down now. Bai Yao's smile expression disappeared, her lips trembled, a pair of bright eyes gazing only at Zhang Xiaofan's figure. After a while, she slowly sat down and at the same time, pulled Zhang Xiaofan, saying, you should sit too. Zhang Xiaofan's face turned red, said, I can sit on the floor. Unexpectedly Bai Yao gave a jerk and pulled him over to sit with her on the bamboo. She said with annoyance, ask you to sit, you should sit. Why would you want to sit on the floor? Zhang Xiaofan laughed embarrassedly. He caught a whiff of fragrance beside him, faintly drifting over, from his nostrils it entered, and into the depths of his heart. Unable to bear, he turned and looked at her, and saw that Bai Yao was also looking at him, gazing at him deeply, with unspeakable tenderness. Never had he noticed, even when they were trapped in Blood Drop Cave under Black Stone Cave, Zhang Xiaofan had never felt this close to her before. After a long while, he suddenly said, Bai Yao. Bai Yao smiled and said, yes. Zhang Xiaofan gazed at her and asked, why are you being so good to me? Bai Yao was stunned for a while, slowly shifted her gaze to the ground in front of her, her face expression also seemed to be befuddled, and said, right. Why am I being so good to you? Over their heads, the bamboo leaves rustled gently in the valley breeze, it seemed to be gently saying something to my family, and also the past matters, you should know right. After a long silence, Bai Yao quietly said. Zhang Xiaofan lightly nodded, and said, yes. Bai Yao unhurriedly said, since young, my mother was not with me, father too was busy with the holy sect's big matters, he seldom had time for me. Everyone around me, because of my father, always greeted me with smiling faces, and fawned upon me. Zhang Xiaofan was silent for a while and said, your father is actually very concerned about you. Bai Yao nodded her head, said, yes. But I did not understand it in the past, until I met you then I understand. She gazed at Zhang Xiaofan, quietly said, Xiaofan, the days in Blood Drop Cave, I can never forget in this lifetime. Her voice, at this moment, seemed to be far away, unexpectedly in the darkness, even when I was about to die, I could also find someone to depend on. Zhang Xiaofan's heart was moved, but he did not know what to say. A white and as smooth as jade hand stretched over, Bai Yao gently held his hand, from her soft skin, it emitted a faint gentleness. She took a handkerchief from her bosom, gently wiped the stains on Zhang Xiaofan's sleeve, which was used to wipe the bamboo for her. Ever since from young until now, Countless number of people has tried to please me, sending me rare and priceless treasures, but, she lifted her head, looked into Zhang Xiaofan's eyes, softly said, even if all of the rare treasures in the world are now placed in front of me, it is not even worthy of this sleeve which you had used to wipe the bamboo for me. At this moment, all of the sounds in the world, suddenly disappeared. Only this beautiful girl's gentle eyes, surrounded all of his vision. How many years after, when you think back the past, do you still remember that year, somebody once, quietly confessed their heartfelt thoughts to you? That because being young, with some innocent and fanatical words, do you still remember? Just like being deeply engraved in your heart, an oath that is unwilling to die or give up. Did you spread open your arms, and hug that beloved into your embrace? Without knowing when, in that sea of gentle tranquility, he opened his arms, together with that beautiful girl beside him, tightly embraced. Chapter 77 At a loss. Dubaku equals Chong Jian. Lady Jingling equals Lady Jinling. Lupin Bell equals Hihuan Bell. Uncle Bozo equals Wang Shu. Shadows of bamboos danced, shards of sunlight shone down, landed upon the clearing in the bamboo forest. Zhang Xiaofan gazed far into the bamboo forest, quietly said, actually, sometimes I find myself so silly, my senior sister clearly liked Chihao's senior brother, instead but, at that time, when I saw her standing in front of Kui Niu, I didn't know what I was thinking, and just dashed up. Bai Yao leaned on his side, suddenly said, if I encountered danger too, will you save me like that? Zhang Xiaofan awkwardly laughed, scratched his head, after a while replied, I also don't know, but after pausing for a while and thinking carefully again, said, should be Ba. Bai Yao smiled, gave him an annoyed stare, withdrew her stare, and looked afar, quietly said, if instead, you were the one who had met with danger, even if I had to exchange my life for you, I would also gladly do it. Zhang Xiaofan was shocked, turned and looked at her. Bai Yao looked solemn and did not seem to be joking, he stammered and said, what did you say? Bai Yao smiled, and looked as if something suddenly came to her mind, said to Zhang Xiaofan, Xiaofan, come with me Ba. Zhang Xiaofan frowned and said, to where? Bai Yao said, anywhere, the world is so big, it doesn't matter where we go. You do not wish to enter into our holy sect and be an enemy to your sect, then we shall not enter, and travel together to the ends of the world. If not, should you continue to stay in Qingyun sect and judging from those old antiques, temperaments, I only fear the worst for you. Zhang Xiaofan turned silent, Bai Yao worriedly looked at him, waiting. Finally, Zhang Xiaofan turned to look at her. Bai Yao was about to say something but saw Zhang Xiaofan instead was slowly shaking his head. Can't, I will not leave Qingyun, Bai Yao. Bai Yao's expression immediately turned somber, and said, don't tell me you want to stay here and wait for death. Zhang Xiaofan, after remaining silent for a while, said, Bai Yao, you don't understand, Qingyun is my home, I am raised up by my teacher's wife, I cannot abandon them. Bai Yao angrily said, that teacher of yours scold and punish you every time, you still say they are good. Zhang Xiaofan stood up straight, smiled lightly and said, Bai Yao, I may look somehow stupid to other people, but on these matters, I can still tell. Although my teacher has always been strict but he treats me really well, I know it, he treats me sincerely. He spoke quietly, the recent incidents, actually it is all my fault. I was the one who lied to him, therefore whatever punishment that I receive, I deserve it, but I should never betray my sect. Bai Yao was stunned for a moment, suddenly sighed and said, which part of you is stupid? You are very clever, no wonder my dad always told me, although you look simple and slow but you are actually very intelligent. Zhang Xiaofan was surprised and his face turned red, said, your dad he spoke of me like that. Bai Yao laughed and did not reply, walked up to him and said, I know your character, and will not force you to leave, but now that you are holding our sect rare treasure, and are also involved with Tianyin Temple, it is really very dangerous. Have you decided what to do? Zhang Xiaofan gave a bitter laugh and said, I will leave it to heaven. Bai Yao stared at him, softly said, you better be all right. Zhang Xiaofan laughed, looked up to the sky, said, you have been here for quite a long time, you better hurry back. Just in case should any incidents happen. If we are fated in the future, then we shall meet again. Bai Yao's body shook, Zhang Xiaofan somehow also felt agonized in his heart. The journey to Tongtian Peak tomorrow, he really did not have any confidence on what would be the outcome eventually. He turned, and slowly walked towards the boundary of the bamboo forest. Just when he had walked several zhongs away, he suddenly heard Biao's voice from the back, "Xiao Fan, I ask you one thing." Zhang Xiaofan turned around and asked in surprise, "What?" Bai Yao also seemed a bit hesitant, but eventually still continued, "In that forest outside the lake town, you had once looked upon a well on a full moon night. I will like to know, what did you see inside the well?" Zhang Xiaofan was taken aback, curiously asked, "Why do you want to know this too?" Bai Yao suddenly felt nervous, became annoyed and said, "Just say." Zhang Xiaofan frowned and said, "Just what strange properties did the well have that all of you will be so interested?" Bai Yao smiled and did not reply. Zhang Xiaofan opened his mouth to speak, but without knowing what he had recalled, his face turned red again, and eventually did not say it. After a while he then said, I until the next time we meet again, I will surely tell you." Bai Yao looked surprised, and smiled. After all, she had heard Zhang Xiaofan's intention, that he was not that willing to be manipulated by his teachers, immediately smiled and said, "All right. You must remember oh." Zhang Xiaofan laughed. After talking his heart out together with Bai Yao, his mood had for the moment brightened up a lot, and he felt much lighter. He stretched out his hand and waved to Bai Yao, turned and walked out of the bamboo forest. After a short distance, the monkey Xiao Wei, without knowing which big bamboo top it had jumped down from, landed on Zhang Xiaofan's shoulder, and even turned back to look at Bai Yao. In the depth of the bamboo forest, Bai Yao, without moving, stared blankly after that gradually disappearing figure. The next day, morning. When the humid air in between the mountains were still drifting in the Big Bamboo Valley, the Big Bamboo Valley people were all already up and ready. Tian Buyi was all prepared, walking slowly towards the empty ground in front of observed silence hall with Suru. Everyone was already waiting over there. Zhang Xiaofan stood last in the crowd. Tian Buyi indifferently said, "Darren, you will bring Lao Qi, the rest of them do not need to go." Song Darren nodded his head and acknowledged. Disappointments were seen on the rest of the disciples' faces. Only Tian Linger stood up and said to Tian Buyi, "Dad, I want to go too." Tian Buyi frowned and said, "Why do you want to go? You will only add to the mess." Tian Linger clenched her teeth and looked at Suru with pleading eyes, called out, "Mum." Suru sighed, and said to Tian Buyi, "Never mind, let her go ba." Tian Buyi frowned, eventually unwillingly nodded his head and looked away, took a look at Zhang Xiaofan who was standing afar, and said, "Let's go." Speaking which, he flung his sleeve, steered his celestial sword, and led the flight. Suru soon followed behind. On the ground, the disciples crowded around. Hidaji gave a cough and spoke to Zhang Xiaofan, "Little junior brother, you be careful." Zhang Xiaofan, in these few days, this was the first time he saw that his senior brothers had concern on their faces. He was touched and replied quietly, "Yes." Song Darren sighed and said, "Little junior brother, let's go." Zhang Xiaofan acknowledged, walked to Song Darren and couldn't help but look towards Tian Linger, who was beside. But instead, she was also looking at him at the same time. Although her eyes were full of concern, but she never spoke a word. Sha, two sounds were heard. Zhang Xiaofan, once again stood behind Song Darren, soared up and straight into the clear sky. Looking at the sky which was turning more blue, it seemed like everything was back to the start of the Seven Peaks tournament, but the feeling of excitement then was missing. Passing the peaks, reaching into the clouds, towering and majestic, still as with celestial air swirling around, still as untainted of any mortal touch, it seemed to open its arms, welcoming their arrival. Song Darren, bringing Zhang Xiaofan, with Tian Linger together landed at the Cloud Sea. Up upon the summit, the Crystal Hall, the distant bell chimes were still being heard. The figures of Tian Buyi and Suru had already disappeared, most likely they had went up first to Crystal Hall. Instead at Cloud Sea, large number of sect heads and their disciples had gathered, and at this moment, saw that Song Darren and the rest had arrived. Immediately, there was a wave of commotion. Many of their stares turned to the one standing behind, Zhang Xiaofan. Numerous whispers and talks, on Cloud Sea, just like those floating clouds, drifted here and there. Song Darren and Tian Linger's faces were tightly drawn, they acted as they did not notice the stares. After a while, one person from among the crowd walked towards the three of them. Zhang Xiaofan looked at him, and recognized the person. It was the main sect disciple, Chang Jian, whom he had met when he came to Tongtian Valley the previous time. He was also the one who had fought with Song Darren at Seven Peaks tournament. Song Darren too recognized the person. When he saw that the person had walked over, he made a greeting gesture and said, Chong senior brother, how have you been? Chong Jian quickly returned the gestures, but at the corner of his eyes, he still looked over Zhang Xiaofan a few times, and said, Song senior brother, Tian Buyi teacher uncle had already arrived here just now, and had specially instructed junior brother, once you all have arrived, to let me lead all of you directly to Crystal Hall. Song Darren nodded his head and said, then we shall trouble Chong senior brother. Chong Jian smiled coolly, moved sideways and said, then will the few of you please follow me. Speaking which, he took the lead. Song Darren, Tian Linger and Zhang Xiaofan followed behind him, walked through the cloud sea, walked past numerous Qing Yun disciples, stairs, arrived at the Rainbow Bridge and walked up. At this time, the first ray of light finally shot out towards the mortal world, gently shone upon Tongtian Valley, the clear water ripples on both sides of the bridge, and also in the layer upon layers of rippling waves, a beautiful rainbow emerged. Zhang Xiaofan breathed deeply and looked far away. That infinite heaven and earth, the unfathomable enormous painting, and himself, in the end, he was only a tiny embellishment inside it. They walked on, until after the Rainbow Bridge, arrived upon the sea-green pond, and saw that wide flight of stairs leading straight to Crystal Hall. Just that they did not see the Qing Yun Hill Sect Peak's venerated spirit water unicorn, guessing that it still should be inside the sea-green pond. Clang! The Crystal Hall at the peak, again sounded a clear chime. Chong Jian looked at them and smiled, said, we are almost there, let's go. Song Darren acknowledged, but still couldn't help and looked at Zhang Xiaofan. However, little junior brother was staring blankly at the mountain top, expressionless. Here was much quieter than Cloud Sea. On their way up, they almost didn't see any of the Qing Yun disciples. Only a few young disciples were doing their cleaning chores, whom greeted and made a vertical palm gesture when they saw Chong Jian. One step, one flight of stairs. Zhang Xiaofan slowly walked up. The more he climbed, the higher he was. But without knowing why, he felt his heart became heavier and heavier. That place in front of him, with celestial air swirling around, the nearer he went, it instead made his heart pounded even faster. The anxiety from nowhere wrapped around him tightly. And what would be waiting for him? In Tongtian Valley Crystal Hall, another distant bell chimed. The chime lingered within the mountain valleys. At the foot of Qing Yun Hill, in a deserted place, there were 4 people standing side by side, 3 men and a lady, quietly looking at Qing Yun Hill. After a long while, the one who was the oldest, god of poison, suddenly laughed, said, I cannot believe that while I am still alive, I can actually come back here. Ghost King, who was standing beside him, smiled coolly and said, with Senior you taking charge, we can do far more than just returning here. In a while, even if we reach the top of Tongtian Valley, it is also not surprising. God of Poison immediately shook his head, smiled and said, Ghost King old brother, haven't we discussed already? This time this big matter, Chongshen Hall Yu Yongzi fellow brother will lead, we are just the footwork soldiers only. Speaking, he turned his head, and spoke to the man standing on the other side, that is right. Yu Yongzi old brother, he. Part of the evil faction 4 big branches, Chongshen Hall head Yu Yongzi, with both eyebrows reaching into his temples, his face was extremely handsome, he looked to be in his early 30s, but in fact he was an evil faction scholar who had already practiced for several hundred years. Within the evil faction, Chongshen Hall was a special branch. Because all along, it had always been this group who was responsible for defending the evil faction's most holy place in the wildlands, the Holy Temple. And this branch's main purpose, just like its name, was to achieve immortality. Just that they were ranked among the 4 main branches of the evil faction, whenever they performed their tasks, their methods were usually unscrupulous, completely different from good faction's practice of achieving immortality. For that, we would talk about it later. This time the evil faction secretly came to Qing Yun Hill to mount a large-scale offensive. When Yu Yongzi arrived, after a few secretive discussions, he was voted as the leader for this evil faction's major operation. Inevitably, he felt somehow conceited, immediately laughed and said, Qing Yun Hill these few hundred years have always bully and oppress our holy sect, today we must demand justice from them. Ghost King laughed and said, well said. After speaking, he turned his head and spoke to the lady who was standing beside, who was also the only female sect head among the 4 big branches, He Huan branch San Miao Fairy translator's note, which also mean 3 wonderful special skills, smiled and said, later on, we will also want to see Fairy your magical ingenious skills. San Miao Fairy came from the most disordered evil faction He Huan branch. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, but looking at her, there was not a hint of lascivious air. Her face was plain, without any makeup, but instead there was an icy frost beauty, much similar to Qing Yunhil, that little bamboo valley Lu Shuiqi. After hearing Ghost King's words, San Miao Fairy smiled indifferently, said, 3 fellow brothers are all important figures who had seen the world, far exceeding me, this small girl. Just that we all swore an oath in front of Wisdom Queen and Wisdom King, that we must work together in this mission, to wipe away the humiliation suffered by Holy Temple at that time. I still hope that 3 fellow brothers will put away the past grievances together and not to let down the promise made earlier. 3 of them, including Ghost King, looked at each other, said together, Fairy, please do not worry, we do not have other ulterior motives. San Miao Fairy smiled, and turned to speak to Ghost King. Ghost King, fellow brother, I have been here for several days, why didn't I get to see brother's daughter? Ghost King was stunned for a while, said, you mean Bai Yao, that girl? Children love to play, I also do not know where she went, I wonder why Fairy is looking for her. San Miao Fairy said indifferently, not particularly anything, just that I recently heard, your precious daughter, translator's note, honorific terms for person's daughter, gained a treasure, a rare Huan bell left by Lady Jin Ling, is there such matter? God of Poison and Yu Yongzi both changed countenance slightly. Evidently the name, Lady Jin Ling, even to them, both who were such heavyweights in evil faction, they also could not treat it lightly. Ghost King's face countenance changed, a subtle gleam of light shone in his eyes, said, I wonder from where did Fairy get this news? San Miao Fairy stretched out her jade-like hand, lightly arranged her hair, expressionlessly replied, naturally I heard it. Ghost King, fellow brother, 800 years ago Lady Jin Ling was our Huan branch's elder founder. The Huan bell that she left behind, is even more of our Huan branch's main treasure, this, I guess you should know also, right? Ghost King did not speak anymore, but his hands were clasped behind his back, his bearing upright, absolutely showing no sign of him avoiding the topic. The harmonious atmosphere just now, seemed to become hostile in a flash. Yu Yongzi coughed once, glanced at God of Poison. Unexpectedly God of Poison turned his head away and looked instead at the distant Qing Yunhil peak, obviously refusing to meddle in this. Yu Yongzi cursed in his heart. If this had happened in the past, he himself would also wish that these 2 rivals would fight till their deaths, but now that he was the leader of this operation, he could only walk up and said, both, why did you all turn angry while chatting? Both of you are also highly skilled masters, and right now we have an important matter, why not we leave this issue first, after we concluded our business, both of you could continue to settle it privately, how is it? San Miao Fairy looked at him, nodded slightly and shifted her gaze away. Ghost King was expressionless, but in his heart, he was sneering. This Yu Yongzi was indeed not a decent person. In view of his own position he had to step in, but subtly instigated both branches to fight after this event. But that Huan bell was not any treasure, it had always been classified with Ghost King sects, Hidden Dragon Cauldron, Blood Forger Halls, Sinister Orb, and Wandu sects, Thousand Poison returned to Clan Bag, as evil faction's 4 great rare treasures. What's more, a rumor had always been heard in the evil faction, that the many strange magical spells in Huan sect, required this Huan bell as an intermediary for them to realize their full magical potential. This kind of important treasure, even how stupid Ghost King would be, he would not be willing to give it up. After Bai Yao found this treasure from Blooddrop Cave in Blackstone Cave, he even specially instructed not to announce it, but instead, he did not expect San Miao Fairy to be that resourceful, that she could actually get hold of this news. In this short while, Ghost King thought through all of the people around him, but his expression still carried a slight smile, said, what Yu Yongzi fellow brother said was true, there is no harm to talk about this after the matter. Yu Yongzi saw that these 2 people, who had always been arrogant and obstinate, actually listened to him. He could not help but felt complacent. At this moment, God of Poison suddenly cried out, ah! The sun is out. All of them heard what was said and looked towards Qing Yunhil together, and true enough, the first sun rays shone brilliantly, slowly rising from the distant Qing Yunhil peak, spilling sunlight into the world. That pleasantly warm sunlight, also at the same time, shone upon these 4 people, pulling long shadows behind them. After completing the last flight of stairs, Zhang Xiaofan finally arrived outside Crystal Hall again. This huge solemn palace building, towering in front of him, grand and imposing, when humans stood in front of it, they seemed like ants in comparison. Chang Jian said, let's go in ba. Song Darren and Tian Linger both nodded their heads. Zhang Xiaofan was about to take a step out, suddenly his body shook, his eyes looked to the side. At the other corner of the stairs, someone was leaning against the railing and sitting on the ground. His clothes was considered clean, but because he was sitting carelessly on the ground, the clothes hem were stained with dust. A pair of eyes looking at Zhang Xiaofan dazedly. What was his mouth mumbling? He was the Wang Shu who had been crazy for many years. Zhang Xiaofan's heart ached and was about to walk over, but was held back by Song Darren. In a low voice he said, "Little junior brother, we better go in first. Don't let the various teachers wait too long. As for Wang Shu, wait till you come out and visit him again, it will still not be too late." Zhang Xiaofan stopped his steps. His heart felt terrible, but in the end he knew that Song Darren's words were true. He himself right now was a criminal. Immediately he nodded, forced a smile to Song Darren. Chang Jian, who was standing beside, saw it all, spoke in a low voice, "Both, if there is nothing else, let's go in to greet the various seniors and teachers." Song Darren acknowledged and walked forward with Zhang Xiaofan. Tian Linger instead frowned and said, "Senior and teachers. Chang senior brother, don't tell me other sects, seniors also came." Chang Jian hesitated for a while and replied, "Yes, a few of the holy monks from Tianyin Temple have come, also Fenshang Valley seniors, all have come to us to inquire about Zhang junior brother's situation." Tian Linger lost color, her face turned white, Song Darren's brows wrinkled tightly. Zhang Xiaofan silently walked up, said, "Chang senior brother, let's go in ba." Chang Jian took a look at him, nodded and said, "All right, all of you follow me." After which, he walked in taking the lead. Zhang Xiaofan took a deep breath, moved his somehow heavy feet and followed in. Behind him, Song Darren and Tian Linger looked at each other, saw the anxiety and worry in each other's eyes, but at the same time too, helplessness. They could only followed in. Just when they had just entered into the crystal hall, Wang Shu, who had been sitting at the corner all along, his eyes kept following Zhang Xiaofan's figure. When he saw Zhang Xiaofan disappeared into crystal hall, without knowing why, he stood up unsteadily, he scratched his head like a child who was confused, and actually followed into the crystal hall. These few years, Wang Shu had been taken care of by Qingyun sect. He had also never gotten well from his madness. He roamed around Tiangtian Peak the whole day, and even the crystal hall which was sacred to the general Qingyun disciples, he went in regularly too. But he had never caused any big trouble. Over time, nobody bothered him too. This time, he too, went in successfully, and disappeared into the crystal hall. Chapter 78 Interrogation. Bako equals Wen Min. Kazi equals Puji. Kongsang Mountains Cave of Fangs equals Thousand Bats Ancient Cave. Stepping over the door threshold, a sense of solemn and dignified energy hit them directly at once. The most sacred place in Qingyun Hill was still as grand and imposing, winning everyone's admiration. Inside the enormous main hall, a great number of people were standing, but without knowing why, Zhang Xiaofan's first glance was not those people. Instead, in the deepest corner of the hall, looking so far away inside the shadows, the three Qing Buddha statues. In front of the big hall, the lighted incense burned silently, releasing translucent smoke continuously. In the middle of the big hall, in the main seat, highly prestige and venerable, sage-like appearance, Reverend Dao Zan sat there, and beside him, there was a small tea table, and on top of that table, it was Zhang Xiaofan's magical weapon, the fire stick. And sitting in a line on his right-hand side, Qingyun sect's various branches, heads, including Tian Buyi, were all sitting there. And the senior disciples of the Qingyun sect various branches, sitting or standing, were all behind them. Qi Hao, Lin Jingyu etc., the people they were familiar with, were all also there. And Lu Shuiqi at this moment, was also silently standing behind Master Shuiyu. Standing beside her was Wen Min, the person that Song Darren admired, her pair of bright eyes staring at Zhang Xiaofan's figure. And on Reverend Daoshuan's right-hand side, there were many that Zhang Xiaofan had never seen before. There were kindly-looking monks and somber-looking old men. Zhang Xiaofan glanced over and saw a few familiar faces in the crowd. Tianyin Temple's Fa Shang and Fashion were there, standing respectfully and cautiously behind an old monk, who was sitting right in front. It seemed like that kindly-looking senior monk was most likely Tianyin Temple holy monk. Chang Jian brought Song Darren, Zhang Xiaofan and Tian Linger over, bowed to Reverend Dao Zan, and said, "Teacher, Big Bamboo Valley, Zhang Junior brother has arrived." There was a rouse of emotions among the crowd. Immediately all of their attention were on them. Not only Zhang Xiaofan, even Song Darren and Tian Linger also felt uncomfortable. Sitting beside Tian Buyi, Suru frowned and said to them, "All of you stand over here." Song Darren and the rest heaved a sigh of relief, acknowledged and walked over. Just at this moment, sitting above Tian Buyi, Taoist Kang Song suddenly coughed. Tian Buyi's face muscle jerked and the corner of his eyes also slightly twitched, but in the end, he still coldly said, "Lao Qi, you stand over there. Head sect reverend and the various seniors have something to say to you." Zhang Xiaofan had just begun to stride off, but just like he had hit a wall, he suddenly stopped. After a while, he softly said, "Yes." Song Darren and Tian Linger looked at each other, and looked at Zhang Xiaofan. Their eyes were full of concern, but eventually they knew that now was not the time, and could only follow the instructions to stand behind Tian Buyi. Reverend Dao Zan was expressionless as he looked down, and saw that in between the two crowds, a youth stood by himself there. In his eyes, there were nervousness and fear, even both of his hands were clasped tightly together into a fist. Was he really the same orphan from the grass temple village who had only mediocre potential? In the depths of his heart, he heaved a sigh. "Zhang Xiaofan," Reverend Dao Zan slowly called out. Zhang Xiaofan's body seemed to tremble for a moment, slowly kneeled down and spoke in a low voice, "Disciple is here." Reverend Dao Zan looked at him, said, "These seniors standing beside, are all masters from my good faction, today all of them because of you. This is Tianyin Temple in charge, Puhong Holy Monk, sitting beside him is also Tianyin Temple Holy Monk, Pukong, and also Fen Shang Shangguan." Reverend Dao Zan could not afford to be impolite, so naturally he had to read out all of those highly well-known pugilists' names in the back, but Zhang Xiaofan did not have the heart to listen on. For a moment, his sight landed on the two kindly-looking old monks sitting right in front. That red Buddhism robe with gold threads ironed on it, snow-like eyebrows, who also at the same time, was looking at him. Puhong Holy Monk ranked as the leader among Tianyin Temple's 4 great holy monks and had always with Qingyun sect Reverend Dao Zan and Fenshang Valley Head classified as the 3 great masters. His high status was incomparable to others. To the common Dao practitioners, to meet him was highly impossible, but unexpectedly this time, he broke the 100 years precedent, activated his magical weapon and rode the way here to Qingyun Hill. Not to say Zhang Xiaofan was astonished, even Qingyun sect who had heard the news were also astounded, and it thus to show that to Tianyin Temple, how important it was that this accidental appearance of great Brahman wisdom, true way being learnt unorthodoxy. In the main hall, without knowing when, Reverend Dao Zan had stopped talking. The whole hall was silent and everyone's attention was on the figure who was kneeling on the ground. Zhang Xiaofan slowly lowered his head, stared at the green brick in the ground in front of him. In the depths of his heart he had a faint thought. These monks, were they the same as that Puji? Far away, the fire stick which was quietly lying at Reverend Daoshuan's tea table, seemed to feel its owner's thoughts. A faint green light flashed over. "Zhang Xiaofan," Reverend Dao Zan slowly said, "now I will ask you a few things, you must honestly answer." Zhang Xiaofan softly said, "Yes." Reverend Dao Zan seemed to be considering his words. After a long while, unhurriedly said, "This East Ocean Lubo Hills expedition, a Tianyin Temple fellow friend recognized that the skills you used while battling the rare beast, Kui Niu, was Tianyin Temple's great Brahman wisdom, true way which has never been divulged to an outsider. Is there such thing?" Zhang Xiaofan did not speak. Suddenly the atmosphere in Crystal Hall seemed to become slightly tensed. Tian Buyi uncomfortably turned his head around but instead saw that everyone was silently staring at Zhang Xiaofan. In the air, there seemed to be an invisible object jumping lightly. After a long time, Zhang Xiaofan's voice slowly said, "Yes." "What?" Immediately, the main hall burst into an uproar, although everyone had expected such an answer, but after hearing it directly from Zhang Xiaofan, Tianyin Temple monks were visibly agitated. Only those sitting in front, Puhong, Pukong, including those standing behind them, Fa Shang, their expression were unchanged, and they remained silent. And on Qingyun's side, Tian Buyi's expression were getting uglier, Tian Linger and the rest were extremely pale. In the midst of shocks, only Lu Shuiqi looked at that silent figure, and did not speak a word. Reverend Dao Zan frowned. He glanced slightly at Tianyin Temple Puhong Holy Monk, and saw that among the sect's disciples, agitated faces, Puhong Venerable instead was slowly closing his eyes, stating clearly he would not speak for the time being. Reverend Dao Zan coldly snorted in his heart, turned to face Zhang Xiaofan, raised his hands towards the commotion to signal silence. He was after all someone important, so very quickly, regardless whether was it Qingyun sect or other famed sects figures, all of them quietened down. Reverend Dao Zan could be heard unhurriedly asking, "Other than this," someone also said, "this fire stick in your hand, saying which, he stretched out his hand to pick up that black stick, and continued to say, on it there is the evil faction vile sinister orb, is this true? Another period of silence. Zhang Xiaofan spoke in a very low voice, yes. This time, unexpectedly, the crowd remained silent. Sinister orb, the word which reeked of blood and evil, would actually be on a Qingyun disciple. Reverend Daoxuan's expression also gradually darkened. He said, do you have anything to say? Despite already knowing that he would face such a situation today, at this moment, Zhang Xiaofan's mind was in a blank. And the thoughts on the unknowable punishments that he might receive, the fear of it made his body trembled slightly. I. As if like a small boat struggling with its might in the sea of despair, he muddling spoke some simple words, but in fact he did not know what he wanted to say. Reverend Daoxuan's face was stern and he said, how did this sinister orb come about? He suddenly raised his voice at the end, changing the pitch to a stern shout. Zhang Xiaofan was startled by his shout. A quaint sound sounded in his head and there was a moment of confusion suddenly. And he finally opened his mouth to speak. Once started, the rest of it followed. From being made fun of by the monkey Xiaohui since young, till chasing together with Tian Linger to the deep and secluded valley at the back of the hill, a deep and secluded valley, the sinister orb and the black stick suddenly fought each other, in the end resulted in such an appearance. In the main hall, everyone looked at each other speechlessly, even Reverend Dao Zan, Puhong, Pukong and including Fen Shang. That Shangguan old man also raised his brows. The fact that sinister orb and soul-absorbing stick smelted together using blood as intermediary, even to these enlightened scholars, it was the first time they had heard of it. It could be seen that in this big world, there was no lack of strange things indeed. The number of people in the crowd that might doubts were not a few, but looking at Zhang Xiaofan's lifeless look and dejected expression, it did not look like he was lying. Reverend Dao Zan muttered to himself for a short while, and after which he looked at Zhang Xiaofan and said, all right, I will tentatively believe your accidental smelt theory, but before this, sinister orb was already on you. You, a small young child, how did you have this type of vile object? Also, sinister orb has always been sucking living things' blood essence, and it had not yet been smelted with soul-absorbing stick at that time, how can you still be unharmed? Zhang Xiaofan was speechless. The truth of the matter, naturally, was because Puji used Buddhism's sect true way to temporarily control sinister orb, and at that time, Puji instructed him to find a desolate and uninhabited cliff to throw it away, but it was Zhang Xiaofan himself who wanted to keep this orb as a keepsake. And right now, to speak of Puji, naturally he had to reveal everything, but this was something deep down in Zhang Xiaofan's heart which he really did not wish to reveal. That kind old monk, truth to be said, had only one night of fate with him. Only that on his last dying breath, he addressed him the one and only time as teacher, but these few years, no matter how hard he tried, he could not forget that person. In that instant, the stares from the surrounding people, voices, all became very distant. The scene in front of him seemed to go back to many years ago, he himself facing that old monk, the young youth stubbornly and firmly saying, I know, even if I died, I will not say. 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 Speak. A loud shout vibrated all around. It was Tian Buyi, frowning and angrily standing up, shocking everyone. His face was extremely grim, but the worry in his eyes was getting serious. At this moment, what Zhang Xiaofan had admitted was that he had infringed Qingyun sect and good faction's major taboo. If according to the normal procedure, he would have to die. Tian Buyi was shocked and infuriated in his heart, but looking at this young disciple who still did not know his life was in danger, especially Tianyin Temple and Fenshang Valley members were also around, even if Qingyun sect had the intention to shield, they were also at their wits' end. If this continued on, he was only afraid that it would be really impossible to protect Zhang Xiaofan's life. Helplessly, Zhang Xiaofan right now looked as if he was being possessed. He slowly lowered his head down, without uttering a single word. Disregarding the rest, Suru and the rest of the Big Bamboo Valley who watched him grew up, all were without exception, speechless and pale. Zhang Xiaofan had always been quiet and firm. At this critical moment, he seemed not to speak no matter what. Tian Buyi abruptly stepped forward, but without waiting to see what he would say or do, Tianyin Temple in charge, Puhong Holy Monk, who had remained silent all this while, suddenly opened his eyes and said, Patron Tian, let's talk over things, let's not get violent. Tian Buyi was stunned. He did not expect that Puhong Venerable would suddenly speak for Zhang Xiaofan, But Puhong holy monk was an esteemed and respected figure, even he as one of Qingyun sect branch head, dared not respected his opinion. He could only expressed HNG and sat back. Reverend Dao Zan coolly took a look at Puhong, frowned slightly, seemed to be having some thoughts, after which he said to Zhang Xiaofan, also, the great Brahman wisdom true way in you, exactly from where did you learn it? The words once spoken, the crowd began to get nervous. The crux of this, indistinctly would affect the internal relations between the current two big good faction sects. This answer must be earth-shattering. But Zhang Xiaofan was still silently kneeling down, after a long while, did not speak a single word. Reverend Dao Xuan's nostrils flared, coldly said, you still do not reveal the truth. From the beginning till the end, Fa Shang, who had been watching Zhang Xiaofan, suddenly lowered his head and did not look at him again. Puhong and Pukong, who were sitting in front of him, at this moment also looked at each other. In their eyes, there was a faint gleam of light, wondered what were they thinking about. The surrounding world, a blanket of silence, and instead became a boundaryless enormous invisible wall, trapping himself within, coldly squeezing. Zhang Xiaofan slowly felt himself unable to breathe, but, until the end, he still did not speak. Maybe, even himself, did not know what was he holding on for. Pong! A loud sound, everyone was startled. Zhang Xiaofan also raised his head to look. It was Reverend Dao Zan, who had slammed the firestick heavily onto the tea table, stood up suddenly, his brows tightly knitted together, obviously this time he was really infuriated, shouted, evil creature. Don't think that just because you refuse to speak, I can do nothing with you. Zhang Xiaofan's body trembled, the expression on his face was complicated, but in the end he still did not speak. Reverend Dao Zan was even more enraged, but instead he began to laugh and said, good, you this evil creature, today I will let you. Sect head please be appeased. Suddenly, a shout from within the Qingyun sect disciples was heard. At once there was a stir among the Qingyun sect, everyone was shocked. Reverend Dao Zan had commanded Qingyun for nearly 100 years, nobody had dared to go against him. Unexpectedly there was somebody today who dared to stop him, even Zhang Xiaofan also turned his head to look. Within the commotion, Lu Shuiqi was seen determinedly walking out from the crowd, into the center, stood beside Zhang Xiaofan and kneeled down. Reverend Dao Zan was dumbfounded for a brief period of time. Master Shuiyu was also extremely shocked, stood up and urgently said, Qi are you mad? Quickly come back. Lu Shuiqi looked slightly pale but she kneeled beside Zhang Xiaofan and did not show any signs of retreating. On that unparalleled beauty face, snow-white teeth gently biting on her pale lower lips, quietly said, Sect head teacher uncle, little Bamboo Valley disciple Lu Shuiqi has something to say. Shuiyu frowned and bellowed, Qi Zhang Xiaofan is big Bamboo Valley disciple, he has committed a serious offense. Sect head will make his own final decision, you don't need to speak your opinion, quickly come back. The corner of Lu Shuiqi's lips seemed to quiver slightly. Zhang Xiaofan who was beside her, at that moment clearly heard her sudden heavy breathing, obviously in front of the crowd, at this very moment kneeling beside him, that kind of pressure was definitely not trivial. Just that, in this solemn and impressive hall, under everyone's unfamiliar stares, this beautiful girl never retreated once. The mountain breeze outside the crystal hall, without knowing when, had blew in. Brushed up a few strands of her hair, gently floating. Zhang Xiaofan gazed at this woman beside him, without saying any word. Sect head teacher uncle, please allow disciple to say a few words. Reverend Dao Zan took a glance at the people around him, saw that the other sects, fellow friends, one after another, were all looking over. He could only coldly said, all right, say it. Lu Shuiqi nodded her head and spoke, thank you sect head. Sect head teacher uncle, every elder teacher uncle and junior teacher uncle, I do not have deep relations with Zhang Xiaofan junior brother, but after the Seven Peaks tournament, I also left the mountain with him. In Kongsang Mountain Thousand Bats ancient cave in East Ocean Lubo Hill, I witnessed how Zhang junior brother fought tooth and nail with the evil faction minions. He is definitely not an evil faction spy. Right now there are outsiders here, maybe Zhang junior brother have some difficult reasons that he cannot speak. Sect head teacher uncle please think thrice before acting, absolutely must not. Wait. Suddenly, a voice interrupted Lu Shuiqi's words. Everyone looked over. It was that Fenshang Valley old man with compound surname, Shangguan, who was sitting below the two holy monks. Earlier on, Zhang Xiaofan's attention was concentrated on the two holy monks from Tianyin Temple and did not notice him. Now that he looked at him, His face was thin-looking, his figure was thin and long, even the words he said, also felt sharp. The outsiders that this lady mentioned, most likely is referring to me, and also Pukong fellow brother as well as fellow brothers in the crowd. Hehe, this kind of matter happened in Qingyun sect, you all still have the nerve to consider yourself as the world's orthodox sect, don't tell me that we can't even be allowed to see an explanation. Reverend Daozan and the other branches leaders' face expressions immediately turned ugly. Taoist Kang Song, who was sitting beside, coldly said, Shangguan Ce fellow brother, today our sect head had since made the decision to interrogate this person in front of all of you, so as to give all of you an explanation. Shangguan Ce he coldly laughed twice, sinisterly said, Taoist Kang Song, on your this Qingyun sect disciple Zhang Xiaofan's body, there are too many secretive things, other than having evil sect evil object, he even know Tianyin Temple's true way which was untaught to outsiders, and most likely he is also involved with our Fenshang Valley's supreme celestial weapon, Inferno Mirror. Speaking until here, he stopped for a while, his gaze turned towards Reverend Daozan, and said, I first stated here, Inferno Mirror is our Fenxiang's treasure, we must definitely find it back. Tian Buyi became more incensed as he listened, coldly laughed once and said, Shangguan fellow brother, since this treasure is so important, how can your Fenshang Valley not protect it well, anyhow throw it anywhere, and actually link it to this disciple? So you are saying, those that were keeping watch over the treasure, I'm afraid are also useless then? Shangguan Ce was infuriated, stood up immediately, Tian Buyi also did not back down, Shua and stood up too, the whole ambience suddenly changed to being tense and swords were ready to be drawn. Reverend Daozan roared, Tian junior brother, what are you doing? Sit down. Tian Buyi glared at Shangguan Ce, but in the end he did not dare to disobey his sect head in front of everyone and slowly sat down. Reverend Daozan turned to speak to Shangguan Ce, Shangguan fellow brother, we will naturally give you an explanation, please be assured. Shangguan Ce coldly laughed and also sat down. Shui Yu, who was beside, angrily said, Chi you still don't want to come back. Unexpectedly, as someone who had always followed her teacher's words and extremely obedient, Lu Shuiqi seemed a changed person today. She raised her head and spoke to Reverend Daozan, sect head teacher uncle, no matter what wrong had Zhang junior brother committed, I beg sect head teacher uncle to investigate thoroughly, but he is definitely not a spy infiltrated into our Qingyun sect. She looked at the person in front of her, her expression solemn, as if she did not have a single fear facing the whole world, and decidedly said, Disciple Lu Shuiqi is willing to use her life as guarantee. Everyone was stunned, even Zhang Xiaofan himself also slightly opened his mouth, stared in shock at this lady kneeling with him, that snow-white skin, icy frost face, suddenly, seemed to also have a faint warmth. Disciple Lin Jingyu is also willing to use his life to guarantee for Zhang Xiaofan. Almost at the same time when Lu Shuiqi finished her words, Lin Jingyu could not bear it any longer, resolutely dashed out and kneeled at the Great Hall, without looking at his teacher, Taoist Kang Song, who immediately turned into a color of a pig liver, as if ready to risk everything, loudly said, Zhang junior brother risked death for Qingyun, is absolutely not a spy sent from outside, disciple grew up with him and knew better that there is no such thing, I request sect head teacher uncle to think thrice. Reverend Daozan at this instant, his face couldn't get any more uglier, but as they received some kind of stimulation, there was a stir among the Qingyun disciples. In a short moment, Fengwei Valley disciple, Longsho Valley disciple as well as Big Bamboo Valley disciple, all at the same time ran out, kneeled down together and said loudly, Disciple is also willing to use my life to guarantee for Zhang Xiaofan. Everyone turned pale and looked over. The three people were Zhang Shushu, Qi Hao and Tian Linger, other than Tian Buyi couple, Longsho Valley head Taoist Kang Song and Fengwei Valley head Zhang Shuchong, all stood up at the same time, extremely shocked. At that moment in the Great Hall, the situation was chaotic. Reverend Daozan was livid in his heart, thinking that don't tell me these disobedient disciples were all intending to rebel today. And happened that right now, many of the good faction fellow sects were all here, he could not throw a fit of anger. He, as this Qingyun sect head, had really lost all of his face. Immediately the anger rushed up to his chest, but with this sudden situation, what should he do? Right at this moment, suddenly a light cough was heard from behind. It was his disciple, Su Yikai, who softly said, Teacher, why don't you go back to take a rest, and handle this later? Reverend Daozan immediately was enlightened, heavily hang, a sound, pong, and hit the table. Instantly the chaotic Qingyun disciples quietened down, and turned to look at him. Reverend Dao Zan, without speaking a word, strided towards the inside of the hall. Everyone looked at each other, only Su Yikai smiled and stood up, spoke to the crowd, there was an urgent matter from the back of the hill and needed my respected teacher to attend to. Would the various honorables please wait a moment? Shang Guanxi's face was full of mockery, said, Su nephew, I already heard before that your Qing Yun sect have many rules, now that I see it, it is in fact extraordinary. A flash of anger appeared in Su Yikai's eyes, but he immediately smiled and said, Senior is joking. After speaking, he turned and softly coughed, and walked to Taoist Kang Song Taoist and the rest of the branch's head seats, softly said, various teacher uncles, why have you still not called them back? Zhang Shukang and the rest then reacted and immediately called back their disciples, admonished them after pulling them aside. Tian Linger was pulled back by Suru, but was not scolded. Instead, she was full of grievances, tears swelling in her eyes, calling, Mother. Suru gave a long sigh, shook her head, indicating not to speak. Tian Linger looked towards Tian Buyi, but Tian Buyi's face was ashen, his brows tightly knitted, did not speak a single word and sat disgruntled on the chair. Lu Shuiqi was forcibly pulled out of Crystal Hall by Wenmin's senior sister. The surrounding people's stares were full of curiosity, until they walked to a deserted corner. Wenmin complained in a low voice, Lu Shuiqi instead bent her head and did not speak. After a while, Master Shui Yu unhurriedly walked over. Wenmin, after all, loved and protected her junior sister, went to meet her teacher, softly spoke to Shui Yu and tried her best to explain, but Shui Yu's face was imposing, and walked straight to Lu Shuiqi. Lu Shuiqi did not dare to look at her, bent her head low and softly called out, Teacher. Shui Yu stared at her. This was her most proudest and most beautiful disciple. After a long while without saying anything, she suddenly sighed. The sound carried a sense of helplessness and an indistinct miserableness and sadness. Both Wenmin and Lu Shuiqi were shocked at the same time. Shui Yu shifted her gaze from Lu Shuiqi, walked to the railings outside Crystal Hall. The heights of the peaks reached up into the sky, white clouds floating, the celestial air was awe-inspiring. Chiur, you did something wrong today, you know. Lu Shuiqi lowered her head and softly said, Yes, teacher. I made it difficult for you, it's all disciples' fault. But that Zhang Xiaofan, he definitely will not be. Shui Yu suddenly turned her head and stared at her, why will you use your life to guarantee for him? Lu Shuiqi immediately turned pale, unable to speak a word. Shui Yu looked at her for a long while, shook her head and sighed softly, injustice sin. Lu Shuiqi spoke in a low voice, Teacher, I am not. Shui Yu suddenly cut her off, do you know when I said you made a mistake, it was not because you embarrassed me. Lu Shuiqi and Wenmin were both shocked. Wenmin astonishingly said, Teacher, what are you saying? Shui Yu gave a bitter laugh, her gaze once again looked away, it seemed she again slipped into a faraway memory. You these young people, do not know the limits of the heaven and earth, showing off only a moment of courage, but instead it will only push that Zhang Xiaofan onto the death path. Lu Shuiqi's face immediately lost color and cried out, Teacher. Shui Yu's voice gradually became solemn, as if again saw the past affairs buried deep in her memory. It had been so many years, in a flash it is almost 100 years over. There was once someone like him, made a big mistake, but we disregarded everything to plead for him, but in the end, still. She slowly turned her head around, looked into both Lu Shuiqi and Wenmin's eyes, softly said, that person's situation at that time, although was not the same as Zhang Xiaofan today, but the circumstances were extremely similar. But that person, was your sect head teacher uncle's most hated person. Shui Yu said with a deep, and even carried a trace of pain, voice. It was the first time in her life, in front of the disciples, she displayed her hurt feelings. Chapter 79 Screen Wall Trouble from Within. In the hall, Reverend Dao Zan had not returned, but among the crowd, whisperings could be heard faintly. When Shui Yu master and disciples, the three of them, walked back in again, they saw that the crowd had separated into two groups at the sides, and Zhang Xiaofan was still kneeling alone on the floor. Lu Shuiqi seemed to hesitate for a moment, but after Shui Yu swept her stern glare over to her, she silently walked where Shui Yu was and stood behind her. After a short while, Reverend Dao Zan unhurriedly walked in from the back quarters, and went to his seat. The hall immediately quietened down. Reverend Dao Zan did not immediately speak to Zhang Xiaofan, and instead with an apologetic expression, spoke to Puhong holy monk who was beside. Puhong's senior brother, my disciple under my sect was disrespectful, making an embarrassment in front of senior brother. Puhong smiled slightly, pressed his palms together and said, "Dao Zan senior brother, what words are these?" At this moment, Taoist Kang Song walked over. He was holding Zhang Xiaofan's that fire stick in his hand, placed it at the tea table beside Reverend Dao Zan. Dao Zan frowned slightly, looked at him, his eyes seemed to carry a slight suspicion. Taoist Kang Song spoke lowly, "Senior brother, just now when you were away, the situation was a bit chaotic. This object is of a big importance, just in case, I kept it away, and am now putting it back here." Dao Zan nodded and said, "Junior brother is considerate." After which Taoist Kang Song retreated back. Reverend Dao Xuan's attention again returned back to Zhang Xiaofan. The crowd at once became nervous, knowing that whatever was coming might be deciding this youth's destiny. "Zhang Xiaofan, I ask you for the last time, do you have anything to say?" Beads of perspiration appeared on Zhang Xiaofan's forehead. The situation in front of him had already reached the climax. Just that he had been in Qingyun for many years, and knew well the taboo of spying on other sects, secret way of passing their true way in the good faction. If he really said the truth out, he did not know what would be his outcome. But Puji monk, who had passed on for many years, he was afraid not only his reputation would be damaged, even his holy bones burial site might have to be moved out from Tianyin Temple's Pure Land Rebirth Tower. And furthermore, Puji monk was one of the 4 great holy monks of Tianyin Temple. Whether or not the crowd would believe him is even more of a problem. There he was battling with himself. For a moment he thought of Puji's voice and face, the next moment he thought of his sect's deep grace and kindness, but to ask him to betray Puji, it was like forcing him to die. In that short moment, it was clear that he was unable to come to a conclusion. But all of the people in the Great Hall would not be giving him any more time. Dao Zan saw that Zhang Xiaofan's expression showed conflicts after listening to his words. Although sweat appeared on his forehead, but he still in the end did not speak a single word. And thinking back on how his disciples had pleaded for him just now, in the depths of his heart, suddenly an unknown fire which had been asleep for many years, raged and burned up. It was like 100 years ago. That white figure was also kneeling like this in Crystal Hall, in front of the 3 Qing Buddha statues, in front of all the various teachers and elders, even when everyone in the same sect pleaded bitterly for him, still that arrogant, that considered himself unexcelled in the world, disdainfully looking at the world. Sitting at the rear, Shui Yu, looking at Reverend Dao Xuan's expression from afar, her body trembled, a trace of sadness flashed over in her eyes, she slowly lowered her head. Pong! A loud sound, everyone was shocked. Reverend Dao Zan seemed to have lost his patience, abruptly stood up, pointed his finger at Zhang Xiaofan and bellowed, "Evil creature! Years ago I took pity on you because of your circumstances then and took you into Qingyun sect. Unexpectedly it seems like I had nurtured a tiger to invite calamity." Zhang Xiaofan's body trembled, he raised his head and opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something. But Reverend Dao Xuan's face was as cold as ice. He frostily said, "If today we do not destroy you this evil creature, how can my Qingyun sect give an explanation to all of the good faction? All right, let me grant you this." The crowd paled. Tian Buyi abruptly stood up. Those in the crowd, Lu Shuiqi, Tian Linger, Lin Jingyu etc. had all turned deathly pale. Even Tianyin Temple Puhong holy monk, who was sitting beside, also seemed like he could not bear to, spoke quietly to Dao Zan, "Dao Zan senior brother, maybe this should be considered again." Dao Zan, hang a sound, coldly replied, "This evil creature had evil faction evil object, and also violated our good faction big taboo. His sins are too grave." While speaking, he picked up the fire stick on top of the tea table. "Today I will let you die under your evil faction evil object." In Zhang Xiaofan's head, a sound of wang was heard. His mind was like a blank sheet of paper, all colors seemed to disappear in front of his eyes. He only vacantly saw Dao Zan raised his arm. Teacher Tian Buyi's face was ashen, and looked like he was about to say something, and the Qingyun disciples around them were in a complete mess. In the Great Hall, it seemed like someone's blood would soon flow. For 5 steps. Translator's note, an idiom meaning blood will be spilled. Yeah, suddenly, a loud shout startled the whole hall. Not one in the crowd did not turn pale. In the confusion, it turned out to be that Dao Xuan's body was shaking violently. He hollered, threw out the firestick, like his hand had been scalded. That firestick streaked across the air like a shadow, dropped onto the floor, dang dang dang, rebounded a few times, and actually rolled till in front of Zhang Xiaofan. Also at this moment, everyone saw that on top of the firestick, a shadow flew up, and in a short while, paused in the mid-air, making GG sounds. That was, as big as a palm, a strange centipede, magnificent colored, with 7 splits in its tail. Right now it vibrated and flew up, shaking its head and wagging its tail, looking extremely arrogant. Zhang Xiaofan was confounded, his whole body seemed to suddenly tremble slightly, his gaze was transfixed onto that strange animal in the mid-air, that thing deeply branded into his memory, 7-tailed centipede. In that instant, time seemed to flow back on a surge of raging current, brought him back to many years ago, that black night, that Puji and mysterious black-attired man's duel, and at the same time losing everything he had in that sanguinary night. His whole body shook, the smell of blood, wafted out from the depths of his heart, boundless, and encircled him all around. He stretched out his hand, and grabbed the firestick tightly in his hand in one go. But at this moment, nobody noticed Zhang Xiaofan's strange look at all, everyone's attention and gazes were all on Reverend Dao Zan. Qingyun sect various senior leaders, their knowledge and experience, were incomparable to ordinary people. In a flash, they surrounded Reverend Dao Zan, especially distancing themselves away from that 7-tailed centipede. Until then, when everyone looked over to see Reverend Dao Zan, all had without exception turned pale. Reverend Dao Xuan's right hand was shaking, there was a wound in his middle finger, obviously wounded by that 7-tailed centipede, and in that short time, the blood that was dripping out was already black. And even more alarming, from the wound in the finger, a ghastly black air could be seen rapidly attacking up. 7-tailed centipede was known as the world's most poisonous poison, and even like Reverend Dao Zan, a master who had superior attainments, was too trapped by it. Reverend Dao Zan in a short while felt faint with blurred vision and his chest felt suffocated, but his attainments was high beyond imagination, far surpassing that Puji monk at that time. Immediately he forced his state of mind to focus, his left hand pointing like a knife, tapped several places in succession on his already numbed left hand, drawing a talisman in the air and straightway suppressed that stream of black air from attacking up. Right now Taoist Kang Song rushed up to him, supported his body tightly, once he saw Reverend Dao Xuan's wound, turned and roared at Zhang Xiaofan, "Zhang Xiaofan, you this evil creature, you actually dared to stab head sect in the back." The crowd was appalled. Zhang Xiaofan hoarsely said, "No, not me." Reverend Dao Zan, who was clustered around by the crowd, looked better at this moment, but that 7-tailed centipede was so venomous, even on his face, black air could be seen indistinctly, weak but it did not disperse. But even so, he was still fully conscious. After breathing deeply, he said, "Quickly capture this evil creature, interrogate him thoroughly." Taoist Kang Song turned his head and said, "Senior brother, don't worry, with me here." Reverend Dao Zan panted deeply, but he was at least half relieved, nodded his head, turned to look at him and was saying, "Then." All of a sudden he stopped speaking. Taoist Kang Song's face in front of him, suddenly from an anxious appearance, turned into an extremely malevolent expression. Also almost at the same time, Reverend Dao Zan felt a coldness in his abdomen, instantly a severe pain followed, his body trembled violently, originally his entire body's vitality essence which was directed to suppress the venom, suddenly dispersed. "Ah!" Reverend Dao Zan howled loudly, his left hand cut straight down. Taoist Kang Song's left hand immediately went up to meet, both palms collided, Taoist Kang Song's body shook greatly and flew out, landed in front of Crystal Hall's entrance. After a short while, a trail of blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth, but all these while, he was still coldly smiling. Above his right hand, horizontally holding a short sword, glittering crystal like water, one look and you would know it was not an ordinary item. And right now, on the sword, numerous blood trails, fresh red blood, from the tip of the sword, drip by drip slowly flowed down, dripping onto the green tiles in the great hall. The crowd that was in chaos just, in an instant, quietened down, like a deathly silence. Reverend Dao Xuan's dark green Taoist robe abdomen area, had instantly already turned into a dark color, his entire face expression had also turned extremely pale, however, the shocked expression on his face now, far surpassed the pain in his body. "You, what are you doing?" His hoarse voice, directed to Taoist Kang Song who was standing outside the great hall entrance, speaking out everyone's thoughts. Right now, even Longshou Valley disciple, Chi Hao, Lin Jingyu etc., also could not seem to believe their own eyes, every one of them with jaws opened, looking at that person who once held the most authority on Qingyun Hill. "Me." Taoist Kang Song seemed to change into another person suddenly, laughed savagely loudly, "I am assassinating you. Don't tell me you can't tell." Speaking which, he signaled using his hands, the 7-tailed centipede which was in mid-air, immediately flew towards him, and vanished into his arm sleeve. Chihao could not bear it any longer, his voice contained confusion and in fright, loudly said, "Teacher, are you mad?" Taoist Kang Song took a look at him, after which his gaze also fell upon Lin Jingyu, who had the same expression, and also many more Longshan Valley disciples, even the other Qingyun sect branch's disciples, all used the same expression of looking at a madman in disbelief to look at him. Ha ha ha, mad. Yes, I have become mad a long time ago. Taoist Kang Song looked up at the sky and laughed loudly. His behavior also seemed to carry a bit of madness. As early as 100 years ago, also at this crystal hall, when I saw Wan Jianyi, Wan's senior brother's fate, I have already turned mad. Teacher. Longshan Valley Chihao and Lin Jingyu's voices by now were already tearful, but behind them, Qingyun sect various elder leaders surrounding Reverend Dao Zan, their bodies instead suddenly stiffen. Wan Jianyi, as if this name carried nightmare, carrying a thick shadow, pressing onto Qingyun sect's atmosphere. The corner of Reverend Daoshuan's eye twitched. In these 100 years, the name that nobody dared to mention in front of him, it seemed to agitate him strongly too. Xiao Yikai supported his body, but out of a sudden felt that Reverend Daoshuan's injured body suddenly shook violently. Even through that layer of clothes, he could felt that, the flame that burned suddenly in his reverend teacher's body, was actually this scorching. Taoist Kang Song stood there with a madman demeanor. It was as if the resentment that was buried over all these years was finally released. In this short period of time, no one actually stepped forward to catch this assailant who had injured Qingyun sect most revered sect head. He pointed at Reverend Dao Zan, and also pointed behind the crowd, that 3 Qing Buddha statues in the shadows, loudly said, you all. He pointed towards Tian Buyi, Shui Yu, Zeng Shuchong, Sheng Zhengliang etc. Qingyun branch heads, all of you upon your own consciences say, this sect head position, who should be the one sitting on it? Was it Wan's senior brother, or him? Nobody answered. The younger disciples were lost on what to do, but Tian Buyi etc. were all ashen, saying nothing. In the great hall, only Taoist Kang Song's mad-like voice reverberated, "Why, you all are not speaking? Is it because you have a guilty conscience? Ha ha ha, yes. Yes. In fact, who do not know exactly what should be done. But right now, who is the one sitting at this position?" Shui Yu's face was pale, looked at Kang Song, who had become a totally different person from his usual self, unhurriedly said, "Kang Song's senior brother, the things had already been over for 100 over years, why do you still persist on it like this?" Pay. Taoist Kang Song right now totally disregarded his own status, viciously pay out a sound, a look of disdain on his face, sneered and replied, 100 over years. Yes, I have bear it for 100 over years, until today then I had the opportunity to uphold the injustice for Wan's senior brother. That time in Qingyun sect, the barbarian ways, you. His finger pointed one by one, even pointed Tian Buyi, Zeng Shuchong, Sheng Zhengliang, sneered and said, for these 100 years, all of you must have been comfortable sitting on the branch head position. Do you still remember that time Wan's senior brother disregarded everything to save our lives? Do you still remember who had selflessly shared with us on how to practice the heart of Tao in those times, allowing us to greatly improve in our Tao attainment? And also you. He suddenly pointed at Shui Yu, coldly said, just now you actually said I am persistent. Hee, who did not know at that time you had unrequited love for Wan's senior brother secretly, and later on he saved you, loved you, didn't expect that day you actually watched him die, and instead today you still ridicule me. Shui Yu's face turned all white. And also you, Tian Buyi. As if he was trying to vent all of his anger in his heart, Taoist Kang Song cackled and pointed at Tian Buyi, loudly said, you say it yourself, how Wan's senior brother treated you, and how did you repay him? Tian Buyi's face was ashen, both hands tightly balled up into fists. His wife Suru, who was standing beside, her face was equally pale, but the two of them never spoke a single word, allowing Taoist Kang Song to cackle loudly and accuse him. You at that time was just an ordinary wooden disciple under Big Bamboo Valley, even your teacher and senior brothers also looked down on you. But after Wan's senior brother met you, he had the foresight to notice that you had great potentials, devoted his attention to groom you. He not only told you his own methods of attainment, even did his utmost to recommend you into the Wildlands 5-member journey. Only from then on you were able to make it to Qingyun's influential figures, only then you were able to sit on this position today. What I have said, is it right? Tian Buyi breathed deeply, his expression mingled with a few degrees of agony. After a long while he unhurriedly said, I have a great debt of gratitude towards Wan's senior brother, even if my body is smashed to pieces and my bones are grounded to powder, I still am unable to repay. Once those words were out, not only Big Bamboo Valley disciples, even the other branches including Tianyin Temple, Fenshang Valley people, who were all alarmed at the internal commotion in Qingyun, their expressions also changed. Obviously even Tian Buyi acknowledged like this, it could be seen that the one senior brother mentioned by Taoist Kang Song, indeed had much secrets. Taoist Kang Song sneered, said, good, you finally also admitted, luckily you still have a bit of conscience, and how did you repay him, say it. Tian Buyi slowly lowered his head, clenched his teeth, even his body seemed to be trembling slightly. Taoist Kang Song cackled and said, all right, you don't want to say it, I say it for you. You this shameless person, to think Wan's senior brother valued you this much, that day after returning to Qingyun Hill, you obviously knew Wan's senior brother liked Little Bamboo Valley Suru, Su Junior's sister, instead you stole his love away, was there such a thing? Tian Buyi abruptly raised his head, but once he met Taoist Kang Song's almost crazy stare, that scorching flame also seemed to burn, but without knowing why, somewhere he felt that, there seemed to be a white figure standing behind Taoist Kang Song. Suddenly he was unable to speak and slowly lowered his head down again. He never spoke. Suru who was beside him suddenly stepped out, loudly said, Kang Song's senior brother, if you have grievances, direct it to me. That time Wan's senior brother was indeed interested in me, but from the beginning till the end, I only had respect and admiration for him. His great kindness to us both husband and wife, was as weighty as a mountain, but to be together with Buyi, was my own intention, it cannot be said as snatching me away. And also at that time, Wan's senior brother, in front of us, had personally wished us both happiness. Taoist Kang Song scoffed and said, Wan's senior brother's character was an extremely proud one, after being betrayed by the two of you, how could he be like the common people, continued to pester around you? He had always rather he was the one hurt, and not let others see. Speaking till here, he seemed unwilling to continue, he looked towards the hurt and panting Reverend Dao Zan, his eyes full of ceaseless hatred, said, Wan's senior brother was like a brother, a father to me, single-handedly cultivated me, even in the wild lands he disregarded his life to save me, my life, had long given up to him. I only regretted that 100 years ago, even after I tried my best, I was still unable to save him. From then onwards, I tell myself, no matter what, I must seek revenge for him. His words, until the last few sentences, he shouted himself hoarse, as if to his own heart, and as if also to that pair of eyes in the underworld. Su Yikai paled, but even more to his surprise, was the body that he was supporting, suddenly pushed him away. Qingyun head sect reverend, supreme leader of the world's good faction for 100 years, Reverend Daoshuan's wound was still bleeding and that black air seemed to thicken. By his own strength suddenly, he walked out slowly, step by step. His grandeur, in a split second overwhelmed everyone, that dark green robe swirled and flew without the wind presence, both of his hands could be seen indistinctly, deeply clenched into fists, even the nails were embedded into his flesh. He looked at the party in front of him, straightened his body, facing Taoist Kang Song, and even more as if he was facing that invisible white figure, spoke loudly and smiled, good, didn't expect that the court case at that time, actually made you this perturbed. You can come over and try, see if I, this senior brother, whether I am indeed fit to be this sect head. He looked over at Kang Song from the side of his eye, suddenly both hands unclenched and his palm stretched out, from his right hand's wound, drops of black blood squirted and flowed out and the black air on his face, also gradually weakened. Just that he looked even more pale but his voice instead became piercing, with a look of disdain, you think you are fit too. Taoist Kang Song suddenly gave a big laugh, said, yes, you are great. During those times in Qingyun sect, it had always been Wan's senior brother and you being the two peerless twins, I am not your match but someone will take care of you. Reverend Daoshuan's expression was solemn, coldly asked, who is it? In the great hall, the crowd held their breath, Qingyun sect disciples looked at each other, and looking at the internal conflict from the sidelines, Tianyin Temple, Fenshang Valley people etc., all looked awkward too. Taoist Kang Song did not cease laughing, and at this moment, suddenly from a distant place outside Crystal Hall, a deep voice was heard, Dao Zan old friend, 100 years not seen, your demeanor is still the same as the past, congratulations. The voice was like thunder, rumbling over, in a short while, killing shouts were heard everywhere outside of Tongtian Peak, chaos ensued in front of the mountain, in the midst of the commotion, someone actually shouted loudly from afar, sorcerers from evil faction are attacking up the mountain. What? Qingyun sect members, all without exception, turned pale. Reverend Dao Zan instead sucked in a breath of cool air, pointing at Taoist Kang Song, almost could not believe himself and said, You actually dare to betray your sect, collude with evil faction. Taoist Kang Song cackled and said, That's right, I colluded with the evil faction, so what? From what I see, Qing Yun sect hide dirt and conceal corruption, not even comparable to evil faction. For the sake of seeking revenge for one senior brother, even if I have to go to hell I also do not care, what's more colluding with evil faction. Suru's face was white, softly said, Madness, madness, he is really mad. Tian Buyi heard it, his face was grim, he knew that for the past few years, Taoist Kang Song's power and authority was extremely powerful in Qing Yun, even the daily defense matters were also handled by him. And today evil faction attacked in force, it was until they almost reached Crystal Hall then they were discovered, the situation was really extremely bad. He, in a blink of an eye, in the commotion instead, saw that his junior disciple Zhang Xiaofan holding his firestick, still standing there. Taking advantage that nobody was paying attention, he pulled him to stand behind himself, but he noticed immediately that there was something wrong with his own junior disciple. Zhang Xiaofan both eyes were faintly reddish and staring unwavering at Taoist Kang Song's figure, his mouth seemed to be mumbling something, it's him, it must be him. Chapter 80 Scheme within scheme. Who was there? At the same time, loud shouts from Qing Yun disciples outside Crystal Hall's entrance were heard but after that, only a few sounds of shua were heard. It seemed like someone highly skilled had flew in and soon after pung-pung sounds were heard, several Qing Yun disciples fell and tumbled in. Outside the door, 4 shadows materialized in a flash, it was the evil faction's 4 great sect leaders. Yu Yongzi and God of Poison stood in the middle, Ghost King and San Miao Fairy flanked the both of them, the 4 of them took a look into this great hall and unhurriedly walked in. The oldest, God of Poison, using his mouth, made sounds of ZZ, smiled and said, Old friend Dao Zan, 100 of years not seen, are you still well? Reverend Dao Xuan's body trembled, his nostrils shrank, and coldly said, God of Poison. God of Poison gave a big laugh and said, It is me this old fool. 100 years ago I was defeated under your sword at the foot of Qing Yun Mountain, today again I see that your elegant demeanor is the same as before, it is a relief that I did not win. Reverend Dao Xuan's gaze looked over each of the 4 person, at the same time, several evil faction men walked in successively from the Crystal Hall's entrance. Looking at those men's bearing and stance, not one of them would be easy to deal with. Most likely the core of evil faction's strength over these 100 years were all here. Among those that the crowd had seen, Ghost King sects Qing Long, Yu Ji, Wan Du clans Bai Du Ji etc. were all there, and for the rest, very likely they were also the 4 great branches highly skilled men. And at somewhere far, cries of battle were getting louder, howls of desperations were also heard from time to time. They used to be paradise-like on earth Qing Yun Mountain, right now were being enveloped by the smell of blood, as if it was in hell. Reverend Dao Zan took a deep breath, with much difficulty he managed to calm his state of mind. Today the trouble started from within, furthermore the external enemy came right into it, one would know without asking, that this was the most dangerous moment for the past 100 years in Qing Yun sect. And as the Qing Yun 1000 years old great sect's reverend head, he definitely would not allow this inheritance to be destroyed at his own hands. At that moment, one of the Buddha's name was suddenly heard, without knowing when, Puhong Master had came to stand beside Reverend Dao Zan, with a light smile in his face. He said, Dao Zan senior brother, since ancient times evil never triumphed over the virtuous, my Tianyin temple this vein, has always fought with Qing Yun sect against the evil spirits and evil ways, if there is any assignment please feel free to instruct. Dao Zan was delighted, also at the same time, those people from Fenshang Valley, with Shangguan Elder as their representative, stepped out and stood behind Reverend Dao Zan and Puhong Master. The 4 great leaders from evil faction countenance slightly changed. God of Poison looked at Puhong, in a deep voice asked, Which Tianyin temple's holy monk is this master? Puhong smiled slightly and said, This venerable patron is really forgetful. 100 years ago at good and evil faction big battle, we too had the fate to face each other before, how can you instead forgot about this old monk? This old monk is Tianyin temple Puhong, beside me is my junior brother, Pukong. Tianyin temple 4 great holy monks were famous beyond words, with the 2 of them, it amounted to several high-skilled fighters from Qing Yun sect, what's even more with Fenshang Valley highly skilled fighters beside. God of Poison turned his head over, knitted his brow at the pale-faced Taoist Kang Song, said, How did these people came to be here? Taoist Kang Song replied fiercely, These bald donkeys and Fenshang Valley fellows all came suddenly to Qing Yun Mountain this morning, There was no advance notice, I was caught unaware and so was unable to notify. Puhong met the glances of Fenshong Valley Shangguan Elder, and both laughed out aloud. Fenshong Valley Shangguan Ce gave a big laugh and said, "This is what they say, evil will not triumph over the virtuous, heaven's net has wide meshes, today definitely will let you these presumptuous evil demons, the whole lot of you to be executed on this Qingyun mountain." Hey hey, a cold sneer, standing beside God of Poison, the one whom was recommended by the majority of the evil sect to be the leader of this exercise, Yu Yongzi, with an arrogant expression, sneered and said, "100 years ago, my holy sect seniors too used only our own sect's strength and fought against your 3 big sects, how can it be that today we will fear all of you?" Well said. Sounds of cheers immediately shouted, mostly came from the group of people standing behind the 4 great leaders, even Ghost King who was standing beside, also clapped and laughed. "Today we'll let all of you see, whether we are the ones to be executed or is that you are the ones to suffer death." This sentence, he said it with absolute savageness, looking disdainfully at everyone. Not one of the good faction people did not change countenance, their expressions revealing abhorrence, especially the last word, death. Ghost King specifically emphasized on it, with the intention of sarcasm. Reverend Dao Zan coldly laughed, was about to say something, but evil factions Yu Yongzi seemed to be the most impatient, waved his hand and at once, different colored streams of light floated out of all of the evil faction's highly skilled fighters' hands. Obviously they were going to fight immediately. In good faction, Qingyun, Tianyin temple members immediately focused their defense, knowing that in front of them would be the most deathly evil in good faction big battle for the past 100 years. Puhong chanted in a low voice, "Amitabha Buddha, Sadhu, sad." Unexpectedly he had not finished his words, something unexpected happened. When everyone's attention was on the evil faction in front of them, suddenly several streams of light floated out at the same time. In them there were even 2 with sharp beams, hitting directly onto Puhong's defenseless back. Boom! In that instant, good faction was like a pot that had exploded. It was a complete mess. Shrill cries and howls immediately cried out at the same time. Puhong Master saw darkness in front of him. He felt 2 great energy forcibly pounded onto his back. An immeasurable force smashed in, another instead turned into a sharp slim needle, stabbed straight through. Puhong Master staggered, spurted out a spray of blood. What kind of figure is he? Translator's note. A rhetorical statement. At once he knew that there were still traitors among the good faction. His entire divine, great Brahman wisdom true way, without hesitation traveled around his whole body, forcibly stopped that enormous assault, at the same time without turning his head, flung one of his sleeves backwards. Pung pung, 2 muffled sounds were heard, 2 cries of surprise sounded from the people behind. Obviously they suffered some harm. That great energy suddenly dispersed, but the other like poisonous needle stream of energy, instead turned into something with form, eventually pierced through that unable to defend in time great Brahman wisdom body shield, and drilled into his body. Within a short while, Qing Yun Tian Buyi and the rest already rushed over. One after another they attacked, but once the assailants attacked, they immediately flew up and over to evil faction group of people. Taking the lead, surprisingly, was Fenshong Valley Shangguan Ce, and the others that were assailing the rest, were all Fenshong Valley people. In the good faction, including Puhong who was assailed, Pukong and the rest of the Tianyin temple members, were all dumbfounded. Reverend Dao Zan, after a long while, then tried to calm down his mind, pointing at Shangguan Ce and said, "You, what are you doing? Don't tell me Fenshong Valley have also sought refuge with evil faction." Shangguan Ce stood beside evil faction 4 great leaders and Taoist Kang Song. His gaze met with theirs at the same time, suddenly laughed out loud, their demeanor extremely savage, filled with complacency. Ghost King laughed heartily and spoke to Reverend Dao Zan, who said they were Fenshong Valley people. Reverend Dao Zan was about to speak, suddenly lost his voice, slowly turned his head and stared at Taoist Kang Song. His face paled. Good, you did well. It was indeed crossing the sea by a trick. Translator's note. An idiom which means using deception to achieve one's aim. Taoist Kang Song, a cold sneer, looking extremely pleased with himself, laughed and said, "This is all thanks to Ghost King's sect head who is wise and full of stratagems. Once he heard that today Tianyin temple bald donkeys suddenly came without invitation, and would ruin my big plans, he immediately thought of sending highly skilled fighters to disguise as Fenshong Valley disciples, picked a few that do not usually roam on earth and leave it to me to present them. It was indeed success at one go." Reverend Daoshuan's body swayed, glanced over. This sneak attack by evil faction, most of their targets were concentrated on Tianyin temple monks, 9 out of 10 were badly injured. Especially their head, Puhong Master. his face as white as sheet. As of now, he could no longer stand. Under his disciple, Faxiong's assistance, he slowly sat down, his back was badly mangled. As for the others, they themselves were no better. Even within Qingyun, 5 or 6 elders were also hurt. Reverend Daoshuan's inside seethed and churned, his heart also gradually sank down, smiled bitterly and said, "Excellent, excellent, to think I have lived in vain for these many years. I actually did not think that Fenshang Valley Shangguan Si fellow brother has always been guarding Inferno altar, and never stepped out of Fenshang Valley, and actually did not suspect you." Ghost King looked at him, smiled and shook his head, said, "You didn't not think of this. I guess you didn't expect that your Taoist Kang Song Jr. brother betrayed you." Another bitter laugh from Reverend Daozan. Crystal Hall sank into silence. The good faction members looked at each other. At this moment, whoever could also see that evil faction had already gained a huge advantage. Although there were still not a few senior experts over at Qingyun side, but there were even more at evil faction side. Among the Tianyin temple monks, looking over right now, those that could fight were estimated to be less than half, and only Pukong and Fa Shang escaped being hurt because of their vigilance. Especially Pukong, it seemed like he had changed into a totally different person right now. He held a golden alms bowl in his palm, emanating golden rays of lights everywhere, looking much like a fiend. In front of him, a bloody mess of flesh. One of the evil faction highly skilled fighter had tried to secretly attack him but was unsuccessful and instead was smashed into pulp by Pukong magical weapon, Buddha Golden Alms. But the most important thing was, the two masters who had been known as the world's good faction Mount Tian North Star, Reverend Daozan and Puhong Master, were seriously injured at the same time. Looking at them right now, Puhong Master was as white as sheet, although Reverend Daozan was slightly better, but no matter how one tried to see, it seemed like an arrow at the end of its flight. Is it that the world's good faction, really coming to its fated end? This question, equivalent to the heaviest stone, weighed heavily on the good faction minds. On the contrary, not one of the evil faction was not jubilant. For 100 over years evil faction had been chased off from Central Plains and stranded in wildlands. Today they could let out all of their resentment in one shot. How not to be high-spirited? Yu Yongzi felt that this time round that he took charge, Holy Sect was able to deal with the incomparable formidable good faction, 2 massive schools in one fell swoop. In his future days within the Holy Sect, his status would definitely be placed above the rest. Maybe from today onwards, he would be able to bring up Chongshen Hall to what 800 years ago Elder Blackheart's Blood Forger Hall scale. Once he thought of this, Yu Yongzi became more conceited, smiling arrogantly and speaking to Reverend Daozan. "Daozan, old thief, quickly hand over your sect's treasure, Zhu Xian ancient sword, and submit to our holy sect. I will spare all of your lives." Ha ha ha. Several highly skilled fighters standing behind him laughed together with him. It seemed like those 100 years of grievances could only be released off today. And at a distance away, the never-ending cries of Qingyun disciples from fighting at close combat on Tongtian Peak seemed to cast a tragic foreshadow on the destiny that Qingyun sect would face today. On Reverend Daoshuan's face, a unwavering determination appeared on his pale expression. Scoffing at Yu Yongzi, he coldly replied, "Even if today my Qingyun sect is ruined by all of you, don't expect us to bend our knees and submit." After which he retreated a few steps and returned to the Qingyun sect group. Tian Buyi, Shang Zhongliang and the rest of the branch's leaders at the same time surrounded him. His favorite disciple, Su Yikai, supported his body and spoke in an urgent low voice, "Teacher, your body." Reverend Daozan snorted, impatiently said, "Right now disaster is right before our eyes. Tian Junior Brother, Zeng Junior Brother, Tian Yun Junior Brother, all of you stay here to defend for a while. Shui Yu Junior Sister, you to lead a few of the second-generation disciples and take Tianyin Temple fellow friends away first. They were injured because of us, we cannot let them suffer further injuries." The ones who were instructed immediately acknowledged. Tian Buyi said, "Sect head senior brother, leave this place to us. You are severely injured, quickly go, as long as the green hills last, another day again." He suddenly stopped and did not continue, but everyone knew the meaning of his words. Zeng Shuchong and the other leaders nodded their heads at the same time, but Reverend Daozan gave a miserable laugh, said, "Our ancestors' work, don't tell me you all actually asked me to give it up and disregard it. I, Daozan, would rather die than be a sinner forever." Tian Buyi and the rest kept quiet. Daozan took a look at the already restless evil faction people, and suddenly seemed to make up his mind on something. Spoke lowly, "Since things have already reached this stage, I have to violate our founder's commandment, and use that as the final kill." The others, including most of the elders, were all stunned. Daozan took a deep breath, said, "There is not much time, I will go and invite the Zhu Xian ancient sword, all of you." He looked around then urgently said, "Regardless of how you all think of me, but with things now, all of you need to be very careful." Tian Buyi and the rest were visibly moved, and were about to speak when suddenly wild laughter was heard, lights from magical weapons flashed, the evil faction group had finally started. In an instant inside the crystal hall which was originally solemn and dignified, magical weapons danced, strange lights swept everywhere, loud crashes and rumbles constantly erupted. In the chaos, taking advantage of Qingyun elders defending the wild attacks from evil faction skilled fighters, Shuiyu led the young disciples and brought the various masters from Tianyin Temple who were injured, into the back halls. Reverend Daozan too, walked to the back but his footsteps showed that he was staggering. Tian Buyi saw that while he was battling, and felt anxious. Sweeping his gaze, he used his scarlet ablazed celestial sword to force the evil faction enemy in front of him to retreat. In a flash appeared beside the pale-faced Qihao, Lin Jingyu, whom were fighting together with the other elders, and urgently said, "We don't need you here, go and escort sect head Reverend now." Qihao, Lin Jingyu's bodies shook, but looking at Tian Buyi's stern expression, they did not dare to disobey. Also, with the sudden betrayal of Longshou Valley head, Taoist Kang Song, to the Longshou Valley disciples, it was a bolt from the blue. They had already lost their directions, right now they quickly acknowledged and followed after Reverend Daozan. Looking at their back figures, Suru who was battling at the side, frowned. After a while, she too found an opportunity to break away and sneaked up to Song Darren and Tian Linger, quietly said, "Your Taoist Kang Song teacher uncle suddenly betrayed us, we do not know if the disciples under him can be trusted, you two should go after your sect head Reverend." Song Darren and Tian Linger were shocked, but after which they understood and immediately followed. Suru was about to turn back when suddenly out of the corner of her eye, in this heaven and earth turning upside down big battle, Zhang Xiaofan, the little disciple who was the center of everyone's attention a while ago, right now was standing alone and being ignored, strangely staring ahead of the evil faction, not moving at all. She frowned, actually her thoughts were the same as Tian Buyi. Never did she believe that this little disciple would be a spy from evil faction, and concerned that Zhang Xiaofan's skill level was too low, immediately flashed over to his side and gently tapped on his shoulder. Zhang Xiaofan's body shook, turned his head around to look, Suru's heart suddenly went cold. Zhang Xiaofan's eyes were all bloodshot, although he still looked alert but without knowing why, a strange demonic aura was felt. But as the situation was too urgent now, Suru was unable to deliberate much, spoke, "Xiaofan, this place is too dangerous, you should too follow your big senior brother and Linger senior sister." Zhang Xiaofan paused for a while, but under his teacher wife's gaze, who had always loved and protected him since young, finally nodded his head and ran into the back halls. Suru felt relieved and following which, she dived into the battle, joining the increasingly fierce fight. Within the loud rumbles, the sounds of various magical weapons clashing fiercely, Zhang Xiaofan ran into the back hall, and caught up to Song Darren and Tian Linger, and soon caught up to Qihao and Lin Jingyu. The few of them surrounded Reverend Daozan. Reverend Daozan took a look at them and nodded his head slightly, but when his gaze fell upon Zhang Xiaofan, his gaze subconsciously stopped and moved away. Not knowing what Zhang Xiaofan was feeling but the firestick that he was holding in his hand, green light was seen faintly rippling through. His head felt dizzy from time to time, and waves of murderous energy like burst of fierce spirits shot up into his head and he couldn't help but to think of the smell of blood. Just that, right now, everyone had something weighing heavily on their minds. Absolutely nobody noticed Zhang Xiaofan's strange look. After a while, Lu Shuiqi and Wen Min from Little Bamboo Valley also appeared in front of the group. Lu Shuiqi took a glance at Zhang Xiaofan, and spoke to Reverend Daozan. "It was teacher who instructed Wen Min's senior sister and me to come over." Reverend Daozan sighed and shook his head slightly, but without saying anything, continued to move forward. Without waiting for them to go far, they could hear booms and rumble sounds as loud as thunder behind them. A few streams of light as thick as a pillar broke through Crystal Hall's roof and shot towards the sky, carrying a few cries. Who would know who had lost their lives? The group countenance changed. Without asking, all of them knew how vicious had the fighting in Crystal Hall became and couldn't help but worry for their respective branches' seniors. Reverend Daozan stared deeply towards that direction, his expression tight, suddenly flung his robe and walked on. The young disciples followed behind him, looking at the figure of someone whom they had always revered like God. Right now his posture was still as before, upright and tall, but on his dark green robe, that startling stain of fresh blood which had turned black, and even that sword-thrust wound left behind by Kang Song's assassination, were all clearly seen. How could Reverend Dao Zan, after suffering these severe injuries, still be able to bear it? The lot of them went past the hall. Among the young disciples, none of them were the lead disciples, which meant none of them came here before. Following Reverend Dao Zan, who passed the hall and the garden, slowly, the clamor noises from Crystal Hall started to disappear. After they had passed Crystal Hall's back hall, they instead walked towards Tongtian Peak rear hill. Reverend Dao Zan took the lead, the rest of them followed closely behind, staying alert and observing the surroundings, although most of the evil faction members were all attacking the front of the hill, but who knows if there would be anyone led in by Taoist Kang Song to the rear of the hill. Zhang Xiaofan walked behind the group, both of his eyes were faintly red, no expression on his face but in the depth of his heart, it was instead like terrifying waves, shocked by Qing Yun Sect's calamity and at the same time, struggling with his past vengeance. In his memory, although he had not seen the killer who had massacred Grass Temple Village villagers, but whenever he recalled that scene, he would think of that vicious mysterious black-attired man. And looking at it today, it was most likely Taoist Kang Song. Although there were 2 orphans from Grass Temple Village, but only Zhang Xiaofan had seen that black-attired man battling with Pu Ji, and since he had confirmed it today, immediately the aged-long hatred surfaced, and that fire stick in his hand, which was smelted with the world's 2 most lethal weapons, Sinister Orb and Soul-Absorbing Stick, were triggered by his owner's hatred, and at once, the deeply buried evil currents surfaced and instead influenced Zhang Xiaofan more. If this happened on normal days, even without Reverend Dao Xuan's skills, Tian Buyi would have long discovered something strange with Zhang Xiaofan, but right now who would have the mind to care about him? Just that nobody knew, this little small disciple of Qing Yun, was actually in an extremely agitated state, the critical moment between the heaven and man's war. If he was not careful, he would be tainted by the evil ruthless energy of Sinister Orb and Soul-Absorbing Stick, lost and beyond redemption. As expected, the truth proved Tian Buyi, Shui Yu and the rest's concerns as valid. Although the small road at Tongtian Peak rear hill was secluded, but within a short while of walking, several evil faction disciples suddenly rushed out from both sides. Qi Hao and the rest immediately went up to defend. Revered Dao Zan only took a glance, disregarded the scene and walked straight ahead. The attack on Qing Yun, most indeed was evil faction's elites, even the ones hiding here, were not lowly skilled too. Qi Hao, Lu Shuiqi and the rest were unable to subdue them in a hurry. Song Darren and the others continued to protect Reverend Dao Zan, leaving Qi Hao and Lu Shuiqi to handle the enemies. Right now there was actually a question in everyone's mind: why did Reverend Dao Shui not use flight? Could it be that his injuries were so severe until to that degree? Just that right now nobody dared to ask him. After a short while, a crash was heard. Several more evil faction disciples dashed out from both sides. Song Darren and Wen Min, Tian Linger blocked them. Zhang Xiaofan and Lin Jingyu also went forward. Song Darren impatiently said, "3 of us is enough, quickly go protect head sect Reverend." Lin Jingyu gritted his teeth, pulled Zhang Xiaofan and ran forward, and caught up again with Reverend Dao Zan. This time round, surprisingly they did not encounter evil faction disciples. Reverend Dao Zan led them on a secluded small road in the rear hill for a distance, and stopped at a junction of 3 roads. Lin Jingyu and Zhang Xiaofan also stopped. Zhang Xiaofan did not speak a word while Lin Jingyu raised his head and looked at Reverend Dao Zan. Reverend Dao Zan turned back to look, and suddenly froze, his face expression changed. It seemed to be destined. These 2 persons were the same 2 orphans from the Grass Temple village at that time. After this, will be our Qing Yun sect holy ground, illusory moon cave. I am going in, you all will wait here and do not let any of the evil faction get in. The other road leads to Founder's Ancestral Hall, you all. Lin Jingyu with a look of determination, nodded his head seriously, loudly replied, "Sect head, please don't worry." Reverend Dao Zan looked at him, but his gaze also fell upon the Dragon Slayer's sword in his hand. The Dragon Slayer's sword's jade green ball was roaming around in this quiet and peaceful hill scenery, as if it was thirsting for something. This young man, full of eagerness and determination, indistinctly. Reverend Dao Zan suddenly turned around, gazed towards the road that led to Founder's Ancestral Hall, without saying another word, looked towards the other road and walked on. Lin Jingyu watched until Reverend Dao Zan disappeared from the small road, then turned around, his eyebrows frowning deeply. He was unable to calm his state of mind, even his breathing became heavier. But it was understandable. Qing Yun had suddenly encountered a big calamity, and the one whom he had always regarded as a father figure, Taoist Kang Song, suddenly betrayed them. How could it not caused him to feel that his world was spinning around? Zhang Xiaofan slowly raised his head, looking towards the foot of the hill, Crystal Hall's direction, but he could only see the dense forest. Even the corner of the hall's roof could not be seen. Instead, on the other road, leading to Founder's ancestral hall, behind the forest, there was an indistinct house outline. Bell tolls were also heard faintly. From the extreme, tensed battle to this extremely secluded place, both of them could not adjust their feelings momentarily. Lin Jingyu panted heavily, breathed deeply and slowly slowed down his own breathing. Suddenly, ahead of them, a dragon's fury-filled cry was heard. Although the distance was great, but the sound waves were like terrifying waves that crashed over, the earth seemed to shake. Both of them were startled. Lin Jingyu was the first to recover, happily said, "It's senior spirit." Zhang Xiaofan also recognized the cry. It was indeed water unicorn's cries of fury. It was obvious that the thousand-year spirit beast that had protected Qingyun Hill was finally awakened and attacked. But it was indeed unimaginable that Qingyun intense battle situation could be rumbling to what extent. Both of them had their own thoughts while waiting for Reverend Dao Zan, but their quiet moments were short-lived. Footsteps were suddenly heard. Both of them were alarmed, secretly wishing that it would be the rest of them arriving, if not. Unexpectedly, heaven seemed to be against Qingyun. After a short while, 5 evil faction disciples appeared, and their leader was the one who had plotted against Puhong Master, the fake Shangguan Ce. Looking at them here, he immediately started to grin hideously and dashed forward, and among the group, there were a few who looked behind them, looking around. Lin Zhang, both of them, lost countenance. With Lin Jingyu quick reflexes, one look and he knew they were not mediocre fighters. Not to say he himself could handle them, but whether the 5 of them would combine their strengths to fight, was the issue. But the illusory moon cave that Reverend Dao Zan went in whatever circumstances, they could not let them in. In the anxious moment, he hardened his heart and made a decision, spoke in a low voice to Zhang Xiaofan. "Xiaofan, I will lead them to the other side, you stay here and guard well." Zhang Xiaofan was stunned, and had not recovered his senses when Lin Jingyu had already dashed out. The Dragon Slayer's sword turned into a jade green ray, swept towards that 5 black-attired men, the momentum magnificently displayed. The fake Shangguan Ce and the rest were shocked. Their expression immediately turned solemn. They did not expect that this small junior Qingyun disciple's skills were so high. They immediately surrounded him, leaving the fake Shangguan Ce alone directing the fight, at the same time observing Zhang Xiaofan's movement. Lin Jingyu fought them together. It was indeed that these evil faction disciples' skills were not mediocre. 3 among them were only slightly weaker than him, but only one of them was well matched in strength. Right now the 4 of them surrounded and attacked him. He was immediately at a disadvantage. Lin Jingyu frowned deeply. He did not wish to continue fighting and immediately extricated himself and retreated towards the other path. That fake Shangguan Ce hesitated for a slight moment, but then soon led 3 of the fighters to chase after him, leaving only one black-attired man with Zhang Xiaofan standing at the same spot. That black-attired man sneered, looked at Zhang Xiaofan, but this young man seemed to hear something and slowly looked up. Appearing before him was a pair full of unknown violent evil bloodshot eyes. Qingyun's tranquil forest, cries of startled birds were suddenly heard, a burst of commotion. Far away, water unicorns' cries of fury were heard faintly, reverberated within heaven and earth.